Great, thanks for recording, SD.
No problem at all. Right, okay, so yeah, we've had, I'm going to say it once more because we've had a little preamble before I've started the recording. I have an issue in that I will probably have to take some phone calls. Everybody understands that. That doesn't seem to be an issue. So where do you guys want to start with this?
I mean, I think that the one thing that we haven't fully resolved yet is this conversation that Lizzie and I have been having regarding whether I can apply the double effect argument when it comes to poisoning animals or killing animals to protect crops.
Right.
I was applying it to that situation, and she pointed out accurately that that it was not applied that way by St. Thomas Aquinas. That actually violates some of the criteria.
Right.
But I was making the argument that my definition is more to the point that Aquinas might have been trying to make, and it still applies as a distinct difference from using an individual as a means to an.
Nick, just for the sake of the recording, would you be able to sort of lay out that argument maybe briefly, if possible?
Yeah. So in a nutshell, one of the common objections to the vegan position is the fact that vegans purchase products that are procured due to that are procured by killing animals in the process of raising the crop, so crop deaths. And while on a practical level, vegans can often come back at that by pointing out that more animals are killed in raising crops to feed them to livestock than killing animals for the crops directly to be fed to vegans. The the steel man of the Cardinals position is that if there was a case in which you could kill less animals by eating meat than by eating crops, then would that be relatively more vegan than eating crops? So that requires the vegan argument, to go beyond a utilitarian point and go to more of a deontological point. And the deontological point that I make is that what's particularly egregious and what we absolutely cannot allow ourselves to do is exploit others, in this case, animal. At least not egregiously exploit others. By egregiously exploit, I mean do something to someone else that would irreparably destroy their lives, either by killing them, by taking away their future, or by permanently maiming them, that sort of thing. And then the exploitation part is essentially is an act of theft. So taking from someone else without their permission or without their implied consent, in the case of like making proxy consent for like a child or an animal that isn't able to cognize all the the whole situation. So you have to make a decision on their behalf. It also precludes cases of brainwashing. So you essentially have to take the role of what Adam Smith called the impartial spectator, or what might be considered the ideal observer, and make a rational and basically make proxy consent on behalf of this individual by steel manning them and being as rational as possible on their behalf. And I would argue that if a case is exploitative, egregiously exploitative, then we have a moral obligation not to ever do it. And I was also furthermore arguing. Sorry that it's going on for so long, but I was further arguing that defending your crops, even by killing, someone who's stealing your crops, a human or non-human, killing them in that process, even intentionally so, is still not an exploitative act. And the reason why I say that is because you would not need to, is that the way you decide whether something's exploitative or not is whether the end that you're trying to achieve could be achieved if that individual never existed, like in an alternate universe. That's kind of the whole thing.
Okay, thanks for laying that out. I'm aware that, shall we say, you and Lizzie have unfinished business. I don't know if that would be fair to say, but I'm aware that on the last AMA that you were kind enough to come to, Lizzie, you expressed that you'd like to have some more time with Nick to discuss this issue, and I'm completely fine with letting it go that way.
Right. Nick, you have invoked the concept of theft. Do you think animals can conceive of theft or ownership?
No, that would be a situation. I mean, they might be able to, like to the level that a child could, but I'm talking about in terms of like an adult understanding of theft, which would be something we would have to do on their. We'd have to decide on their behalf in a proxy sort of way, the way we make proxy decisions on behalf of children for like medical research and stuff.
Right. So you're speaking of making decisions on the animal's behalf. Would animals consent to being killed in the production of crops?
No, it's not so much the decision we're making is not based upon whether they would want something or not, but whether the act we are doing to them would be exploitative.
Why is exploitation a morally relevant trait?
Well, because I think that we have to hold our. I think that we have a moral intuition that that we have to that the baseline standard by which we must hold ourselves is to not exploit others, even if we treat others in a way that we would not necessarily want. Well, I mean, so this is a way that we would definitely. Okay, so let me backtrack a little bit. Uh, so the goal is not to do unto others we want to have them do unto you. It's to not do unto others we would not have them do unto us, and the purest form of that is to not exploit others.
How do you define exploitation?
So I define it based upon whether, if in an alternate universe where that individual did not exist, whether the end that we're trying to achieve would be achievable. And then of course, this is, and then controlling for that, and then but but then I'm also taking into account like whether the other individual would rationally volunteer for the interaction, because certainly there are cases in which we reciprocate with someone else when they would volunteer for the for them being used. So that's not exploitative because they're volunteering.
Yeah, but animals can never volunteer. They can't give consent. So how would you infer that?
Right. So they can. So we have to volunteer for them by taking their rational interests into account. So that's proxy consent.
Right. So it all comes down to us then, what we believe that the animal is thinking or what the animal wants.
Not so much. I mean, us as in the individual who's making the decision. So, I mean, I think us can be an ambiguous term that might sound like, us in like. So some people might use the word us to mean human, and I'm not using like that way. I mean us as in the decision
Well, the human beings are the ones making the decisions. So I mean, it's the same thing. I mean, what's the distinction?
Well, not all human beings are in the us category of decision makers. There are certainly children and mentally disabled people that are not that wouldn't be in that group of us. They would be the ones that would be making proxy decisions on behalf, just like the.
So you're grouping children into this category, but then you remove them from the category. I think there's an inconsistency here.
No. I mean, the children are in the same category as the animals.
Right. So who's the us?
The us is the decision maker. I mean, it doesn't necessarily mean
the adult human beings.
sure, adult neurotypical human beings. It could also be aliens or hard sentient AI. I mean, it's whoever is the moral decision maker, the moral agent.
Right. So, what would be the difference between me saying that an animal would prefer X and you saying the animal would prefer Y? Who's the moral arbiter?
Well, I mean, it would have to be based upon stepping in the shoes of the individual that we're speaking on behalf of, and see whether we would want that, whether we in that their situation would consider that situation to be exploitative.
So, how would you step into the position of a chicken and whether a chicken would be okay with having their eggs?
I mean, it's not like the easiest thing to do in the world, but it is certainly something that it's a problem that society has spent a lot of time, uh, you know, uh, finding solutions for. I mean, this is the whole way
Well,
proxy consent happens in medical research.
well, so
It's
how would you?
also
You haven't really answered the question. You just said it's not easy to discern.
Yeah, I mean it's I mean it's to use whatever process they already use for, like, judges making case on behalf of children in courtrooms, like with the custody battles, or with a medical committees making decisions about whether to allow a child to participate in a medical research experiment.
Do you think there's a distinction between being able to infer what a human child would think as opposed to what an animal would think?
I mean, not a qualitative distinction.
How how not? I don't understand because we know how humans will think, so we know how human children would.
Oh, I mean, I think that we can infer in a similar way to how a non-human animal might think.
How so? I don't understand how you're making that conclusion.
Because cognitively speaking, they're very similar. They have they're similar behavioral responses, the same situations. They seem to have the same sort of the same sort of desires and preferences. The brain's activated in very similar ways, a similar circumstance.
I mean, this word "similar" doesn't really tell me anything. I don't think anyone would say that they're similar to it.
I mean, look, when a cat comes up to me and is purring and rubbing against me in an affectionate way, like, I can infer that that my cat is feeling something similar to what a child would feel when the child comes up to me, is hugging me, and is acting affectionate. I mean, I don't think it's a leap to say that the experience that the cat and the child are having is not similar. I mean, it seems quite similar.
Well, I mean, we generally like run on the assumption that other humans have the same kind of experiences of the world as we do, right? But there are principal limitations to our ability to understand animal thought.
Not that I'm clear in.
Well, there are no elements in the thoughts of animals that match our words, and so there's no precise way to translate their thoughts into our sense.
Well, yeah, I mean, the same could be said for small children.
Well, no, because I just uh, stated that we can assume as a basic heuristic how other humans would think and how human children would.
Yeah, no, I don't see how you could paint a qualitative distinction between a uh, a 2-year-old child and a
Well, do you
and
know
and
what it's like to be a bat, for example? Could
I
you
mean, I know.
infer what it's like to be that animal?
I mean, some of their experiences, sure.
Like what? I mean, describe to me what it would be like to be that.
I mean, I don't know when I assume that when a bat's eating something sweet, the quality that the bat is experiencing is probably similar to the quality that I experience when I eat something sweet. Assuming that bats actually
Nick,
have sweet receptors.
what uh, what are you basing this on? Because it sounds like pure conjecture. I mean, a being's conscious mental landscape involves things that only can be accessed from the point of view of that being.
Okay, so there was an interesting recent study by a guy, I forgot what his first name is, Burns, and he's a neuroscientist at Emory. What he did is he did he had dogs in a functional imaging machine, functional MRI, and had the dog like the dog's caregiver stroke the dog and looked at the brain activation of the dog. And that same area of the brain that was activated in the dog when the dog was being stroked is the same area of the brain that was lit.
But would that be the pleasure receptors in the brain, or what is that? I mean, the fact that then an animal might enjoy something doesn't tell me anything about what it would be like to actually be in the body of that animal. Hello?
I think he went out for a smoke or something. He's not in the chat right now, apparently.
No, maybe he just got disconnected or something.
Oh, I'm Sid, by the way.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know if Beyond wanted to chime in about anything.
Yeah, Beyond, you chip in whenever you want to.
Well, I mean, how are you differentiating between the mental states of other humans and then other animals?
Well, I mean that.
Seems like you're making predictions about humans, right?
Yeah, but you can make that inference because children are just little adult humans. So.
I mean, I don't think they're as self-aware as like a fully grown human. Their brain isn't even as capable.
But I never said that that they were. I'm just saying that as a heuristic, we can generally infer what is in their best interest and what they would want and what they would not desire to occur.
And I mean, why can't we do that with other animals?
Yeah, like I said, we have there's no way of knowing what it's like to be in the body of an animal. So
yeah, but I mean, you don't know what it's like to be in the body of another human.
That is not really a necessary requirement to make the inference. We don't know what animals themselves think is important for their own welfare.
But can't we, since their brains are pretty structurally analogous, and so is their behavior on
analogous to
a wide variety of contexts.
You just use throwing around the words similar and analogous doesn't really say anything, because I can just say that we're very distinct beings. I mean, what does that do?
Yeah, like they respond similarly to like anxiety medication, antidepressants. For example, cows are given antidepressants when we take their baby in the dairy industry.
That doesn't really tell me anything meaningful. So an animal expresses signals of distress when their offspring are taken away. That doesn't really tell me anything about the fact that I can assume what a cow would want for itself day to day, or how it would wish to live.
Yeah, like when it cries when you take its baby, and then you give it an antidepressant, and it seems to get numb, just like a human would. Like the behavior is completely the same. So what's the symmetry breaker aside from just saying species?
No, you can't just say that would be kind of like similar to saying a human being walks and a cow walks, so therefore they're very similar. No, that does.
Well, we're saying like their brains are structurally analogous.
Yeah, but
and it
that
seems
doesn't
like
tell me anything, because Are we behaviorally analogous to cows? Saying that our brains are analogous doesn't really say much if we're reacting completely distinct.
So what's actually the claim about their best interest, like to be murdered?
Well, could you logically, well, to what degree of certainty could you say that, given the lives that these animals lead in the wild, with disease and predation and starvation, so on and so forth, that they wouldn't actually prefer the life that we afford them on a grass-fed farm, for example?
Those are two separate. I can say that they wouldn't prefer to live in the wild and get mutilated by a lion or something like that.
Okay.
But it's tangential to the life on bringing a life into existence on a farm. Like, it's not an unfair comparison, because I could say, well, how would you not know? I could do the exact same thing and say, well, how would you not know that it would prefer to live on a sanctuary where it's not murdered?
Well, because
Because it wouldn't know the difference.
Sid, if you wouldn't mind voluntarily not speaking.
yeah, well, we're not in the under the obligation to maximize their well-being, are we?
Wait, and well, I mean, the question is, why aren't we under an obligation? And these
Yeah,
questions are relevant. So just
but you
like
can't.
saying that is
Why
question.
aren't we? It's not why are we not. It's why would we be? So the burden of proof would rest on you.
Yeah, like, so the line of questioning I'm asking is like if ultimately the conclusion is, oh well, they wouldn't know the difference between being raised on a sanctuary or being raised on a grass-fed farm, where the conditions are the same. The only difference is that in one, their babies are stolen from them. They have fish
Well,
shoved up
not
their ass.
necessarily. No, not necessarily. No. That's not a entailment of being on a grass-fed farm that there are artificially. I just had to correct you there.
Sure, but well, I mean, sure, they might not get a fish shoved up their ass if you have a bowl. But the fact is that the calf is still, in 99.99999% of cases, taken away. That cow undergoes trauma. I mean, we know that they undergo trauma.
Okay, well, why don't we
How
talk about
much trauma?
Yeah.
I just want to chip
Yeah,
in while I've got
just
a
No,
little
go
bit of
ahead.
time to chip in.
just to the point that in some cases they're actually given antidepressants.
Have you ever done it?
Have I ever done what?
Have you ever removed a calf from its mother?
No, but I know that they cry out for days, if not weeks.
No, they cry out for about 5 to 10 minutes.
Well, I mean, I don't. It sounds like you have a farm. You do this.
No, I don't have a farm, but I've worked on farms and I've done the act that you're talking about, and I will acknowledge that yes, the cow does get a bit pissed off about that, but it doesn't seem to last very long.
Because I've seen videos of cows who, like, maybe if it's the first time that the calf is taken away, they think, oh, it'll be a few minutes until they're back, and then. But if it's like the second or third calf that the cow is produced, they know that their baby's not coming back. I've seen them actually chase the.
I thought you said you hadn't done it.
Well, I've seen videos of like dairy cows chasing the calf down the street as the truck pulls away.
I've seen videos of people who believe in flat Earth.
Right, but I mean, it just seems like the cow desires not to have that happen.
Yeah, I'm not denying that the cow undergoes some amount of, shall we just call it, emotional stress. I'm giving you that, right?
Yeah.
But it's really not very long lasting. And if you still object to that, then we just go to a hypothetical, right? Where the cow no longer experiences any stress. Is it okay to do it then?
No. Well, no. I still Yeah, so you're right. Like it wouldn't even really be relevant. Like, look, I'm just pointing out this feature. It looks like if we're trying to make inferences about what's in the cow's best interest, even if it doesn't seem to care, right? Like even if a drunk girl didn't seem to care or respond to you raping her, does that mean that raping her is fine as a result of her not seemingly objecting to it?
No, I've acknowledged that the cow does object to it.
Yeah, but so even if the cow didn't object, like it seems like we agree that that's not the relevant feature of like what's wrong. Look, I'm just pointing out that it seems like
so what would be?
it's causing the cow distress. Well, yeah, I think it's I agree with Nick here that it's an exploitative act, and I might not agree completely on all of the stuff about crop deaths and stuff, because I mean, look, like if you can point to me easy, readily available alternatives that actually lead to less exploitation, harm, and suffering, I think that every person should be choosing those products. And I don't think crop deaths are preferable. I'm opposed also ecologically to monocropping, the effects it has on pesticides, insect life, and then all the bird population that's dying off as a result because their food source is dying off, and then like the trophic cascade that happens. Look, like I think that all of that is like a very bad thing. It can actually lead to the demise of humanity if just through co-extinctions. If species we rely on die, then we should probably be protecting those species, even if it's just extrinsically, even if we don't give them value. It's like they have value in virtue of that they're keeping our civilization afloat, like the keystone species, for example. But I don't want to get off like on that huge tangent. Like,
yeah, I'm sure. I'm
just
sure you
think
don't. But you. Well, hang on. I mean, I let you speak, so let me speak. Like you acknowledged, I think at least, that if we could remove that aspect from cattle farming, I'm going to call it, like you can call it industrial farming if you want, then you don't seem to have much of an objection beyond that, no pun intended.
Sorry, I do have a problem with just the exploitation, and then there's also the ecological factors involved.
Well, I mean, when you think that pretty much anything that you eat, like whatever it was that you sat down to eat earlier, that's going to be exploitative. Why is one any worse than the other?
Like, so the question is, what?
Sorry, I'll be more specific. Sorry, that was vague, I acknowledge. But the food that you eat today or will eat later on, like whatever the case may be, it's different time zone for you. That killed animals, didn't it?
Yeah, I'm sure that, I mean, all of our food choices, the cars we're driving, everything is causing an amount of harm. Yeah, I fully agree with that.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess like the question would be, why are you so deeply concerned about this one aspect of it?
I still I operate with the maxim that we should be reducing it as much as we really can, and I mean, consumer food choices.
Are you doing that?
Yeah.
You are?
Well, I think that our consumer choices have an incredible impact on the environment, like whether it's where I got my t-shirt from or a cell phone, right? I mean, for myself, I personally try to get those all secondhand. And with food, like I examine where it comes from and how I can minimize my impact on the environment. And when it comes to exploitation, I mean, if I could just choose to live in a world where that didn't happen versus a world, the current world, like with human exploitation, wars, animal exploitation, I mean, I don't think that the suffering and pain involved is different to a significant degree between human and animal death, right? Like you might be able to make arguments that maybe humans can have some kind of deeper cognition. I don't know if that's true, but
I wouldn't make that argument. That's not something I know enough about.
I still just think like and look, I know that for you guys, right, for all the omnivores and carnivores listening, like if you could have it your way, right? If you could live in an alternate universe where there was just it wasn't a result that you had to kill an animal to get the meat, you could just get the meat. I mean, I'm sure you guys would prefer that as well. Like we all kind of have this unless you want to kill these creatures, like I don't know anyone who would prefer to actually have the creature suffer and die or actually have to experience death.
Well, sure, but I mean, I'd prefer a world that didn't have cancer too. I mean, that doesn't really address anything that's actually going on, the pragmatic issues of life, I guess.
No, I still think if we have reason or methods to actually reduce cancer rates, we should be maximizing that.
We do, and they involve animal testing, including things like eggs. I think the cancer research facility in where is it? Is it in Canada? I'm not sure where the leading one is, but I saw a documentary on this, and they use like 1 million eggs a week.
Yeah, I don't know how productive that is, though. Like, I don't know what kind of results that's actually yielding.
Well, I can't tell you exactly what results it's yielding, but I saw a very interesting documentary on it, and I mean, would you say that we shouldn't be doing that?
I'll say this might be a nebulous response, but in the cases
well, sure,
that
so some of mine will be too.
Yeah, like in the cases that I'd actually accept humans being tested in that way, I would accept animals being tested in that way. But I again, right, like would prefer that. I don't know if I even have a threshold that is okay. Like I'm still exploring this on my view that how much exploitation of humans is acceptable. I don't know if I actually have any amount that is.
By the way, just let me cut in for a moment. I really like that response to
Yeah, go
Beyond
ahead.
just gave. Yeah, I really like that response that Beyond just gave to the animal research question. I think ultimately, what carnism versus veganism is really it's a matter of differential attitudes towards bigotry. And I think that's the
Can I
reason
just
why.
get one thing real quick? Just real quick. I'm sorry to cut you off, but is carnism just non-veganism?
Yeah, I think you could kind of look at it as sort of synonymous. Yeah.
Okay, that's fine. Continue.
And I think that it makes sense to frame questions revolving animals relative to how you would treat a human in the same circumstance. Because ultimately, the goal in a vegan mindset is to remove speciesism from your from your intuitions and from your moral attitudes. So even if you would be willing to exploit an animal situation, if you'd be willing to exploit a human in that same situation, then you are not being bigoted in terms of species, and so it makes it a morally, it's I think it would be fine under any definition of veganism.
I understand. So, a question I guess I would have for you then is, given the circumstances that I personally kill animals under, if I replace them with humans and all of the relevant problems that are carried over from the animals to the humans are in place, I'm going to say that it's fine to kill those humans.
Oh, I'm sorry, can you say that again? Because that I was surprised at how you ended that.
Yeah, oh, sorry, yes. I wasn't very clear. Like I said before I started recording, I'm going to be a bit distracted. But the reasons that I kill animals, and I do it directly, a lot of people know this about me. The reasons that I do that are to protect crops and to keep species numbers down, certain species at least. And if they were replaced with humans with the same characteristics, I would be quite fine with killing them. So what would you think about that?
The same cognitive characteristics or other characteristics?
everything that's relevant.
So what would be relevant?
They're small, they cause a massive amount of destruction to crops that people, including vegans, want to buy. And if you swap them over, you can't actually contain them, you can't catch them, they're too small, you can't live capture them, and even if you could, what would you do with them? Everything about rabbits, basically.
Sure, but what about experimentation on rabbits?
What about it? I don't see how that answers my question.
Well, I'm just wondering, like, in the case of, or not only on rabbits, but on any non-human animal, like, are you against doing experiments on non-human animals?
Was that on
Or I should,
non-human animals? I didn't catch it, I'm sorry.
well, I guess what I should say is, like, if you, on any experiment that you're currently in acceptance of regarding killing non-human animals, would you be okay with killing humans that had the same relevant characteristics?
I think there's a few significant differences there, but to answer your question, I would probably just say yes for the sake of progressing the conversation.
Oh, I mean, that's quite a concession. I mean, that sounds pretty similar to
not really. I mean, it's pretty different. I mean, you've got all sorts of species, right, that exist in the world that are going to, if they're left unchecked. I mean, I've made this argument many times. It's not a new thing that I'm saying here.
No, I didn't mean concession. I meant a concession for the vegan position. You might have made that concession a year ago. I'm just saying, or maybe you always had it. But the point is that it sounds like something that someone conceding to veganism would say.
Someone conceding to veganism.
Yeah, I don't mean to say that you're conceding right now or that you ever had a different position. What I'm saying is that it seems to go against the standard non-vegan / carnivore position.
Oh, I'm not sure if I hold a standard non-vegan or carnivore position. I just have my position.
Well, so Lizzie highlighted this thing this word I used in the chat, the word bigotry, and I appreciate that she did that because I've actually struggled to find a good term to use to try to illustrate sort of what I think is so objectionable about the non-vegan position. And the best word I've come up with to use is bigotry because it's probably more similar to the connotation of the word racism. But the problem is you can't really use the word racism because that obviously ties to humans. But then if you use the word speciesism, people tend to be dismissive of it. So I have to find some word that has an ism, that has the same connotation as racism, but doesn't talk about race. So it is an ism, but I don't think it's bullshitism either.
I think there's a really big difference there. I mean, are there people of different races that are causing problems and it's specific to their race?
I mean, I think it's just simply the idea that you are disregarding someone else based upon the characteristics that are unrelated to their mind, or that are not, or that might. So I mean, the term that I generally use is vesselism. It's where you treat someone as lesser than based upon their physical features and not based upon the content. And then I differentiate that from sentientism, which is the only ism that I think is a morally tenable position.
So veganism wouldn't be a morally tenable position then?
Oh yeah, thanks veggies. Yeah, yeah. So veggies points out that as a conservative, if you point out that bigotry is a leftist word, I'm not going to use it. But yeah, no.
Well, okay, ignoring that, that's fine.
So veganism is I think the word that we currently use instead of sentientism, but it really is effectively sentientism.
I'm sorry, one more time, could you say that again?
So okay, so I was saying that sentientism is the only ism that is a morally tenable position to have, and it's the end that veganism is our close approximation in our current lexicon for sentientism. And then every other ism I would put in the category of vesselism, and that would include racism and sexism and speciesism.
So you're drawing a line between something like racism and the other 3 or 4 things that you just mentioned.
No, I'm grouping racism with speciesism and sexism in a larger category that I call vesselism, which is what Martin Luther King was attacking when he said that he would like to see people judged by the content of their character, not the color of their.
Sure, I hadn't heard of that term before.
Well, no, I mean I'm kind of trying to introduce it.
Okay, so is it something that if I look it up, I'm gonna find a definition of? Because I genuinely haven't heard that term.
I don't think so.
Okay.
I'm just trying to find a word that can convey the meaning that I'm trying to convey, and currently you can't use the common isms because speciesism is people tend to be dismissive of it, and also speciesism seems to be distinct from other forms of isms, and the whole point is not to sound like an intersectionalist, but I think that all isms are sort of the same category, and I definitely don't want to be considered an intersectionalist for saying that.
Nick, I have a question.
Yeah, you got it.
What's the problem with valuing your own species above all others? What's intrinsically wrong?
I mean, that's an in-group. I mean, that's the sort of bias that we have, traditionally throughout our history found to be sort of the grounds for pretty much every moral atrocity that's ever been committed.
No, I said species. What's wrong with speciesism?
I have a response to that.
Yeah, please.
Well, you just, like, you can't do that if you don't value these species through co-extinction. That this is a synergistic mechanism described in the Journal of Nature. It's actually widely established. I can post the source for this. If you just devalue if you wipe out this other life, you're actually going to wipe out our own species. It's like we have to
life.
Other species.
No, I'm talking about in the context of slaughtering animals for food. That's speciesism, is it not?
Well, I mean, like, I just posted some.
No, I'm referring to.
Like, if you don't want to value them, I mean, like, the cost that you're paying to not value them is to essentially, like, lead to the demise of our civilization.
How does that follow? I'm referring to strictly slaughtering animals for human consumption.
Well, look, like, this is just pragmatic, right? Like, the actual practical result of that is here quoted in this systematic review: 70 to 80% increased land use and greenhouse gas emissions, and over 50% extra water use.
What is that pertaining to? I'm sorry.
That's
so killing an animal to consume an animal doesn't imply that ecological damage.
Well, yeah, it does. What do you mean?
Well, how so? In the case of hunting, or let's say fishing, or aquaculture, and also regenerative farming.
So aquaculture, I'll actually say I think that's the most sustainable one. I actually can get behind that. I think.
But beyond that would also be speciesism, is what I'm saying.
Well, like, speciesism is what? Like, unjustified discrimination based on species?
Well, Nick, could you reiterate?
Well, how would it be speciesism?
Well, Nick laid for the definition of speciesism, so I'm asking him to reiterate. Nick?
Oh, I mean, you want me to reiterate my definition of speciesism?
Yes, please.
I mean, I would think it's a discriminating against someone else based upon their species.
Okay.
So,
And that is a necessary entailment of killing animals for.
I mean, I don't think it's necessarily an entailment. I think, cannibals don't do it.
I'm talking about in the human context of killing animals for.
Yeah, I mean, the way people currently do it, I mean, I think it's actually one of the biggest problems with carnism is this this vesselism component of.
Right, so that is an instance of speciesism, correct?
As it's currently done, yes, in the current
Right,
modern
so
society.
beyond the method of agriculture that you claim you would be supportive of is actually speciesism. So, I mean,
Yeah, like
what follows?
so. Here's my axiom. So I would want a farming system or our food systems to minimize ecological impact and minimize harm, suffering, exploitation, or like death of sentient life as far as we can. So there's those 2 points. If you could bang off those 2 points, then I'll agree with it.
Right, so just to be clear, you're okay with speciesism.
How is this speciesism?
Did you not hear Nick's definition of the term?
I mean, Nick, do you agree that it's just unjustified discrimination based on species?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's all. That's all it is.
Right, so killing an animal, a human being killing an animal to consume the animal would fall under speciesism, according to.
Well, like, sorry, what do you mean? Like, look, are you talking about like clams and stuff? Like, because there's all aquaculture of like
Fish,
land.
cows, animals that we consume.
I don't think you can have aquaculture of cows.
I'm not beyond. I mentioned regenerative farming. That would be the cow case.
Oh
And
well,
fish.
yeah. So I
Fish
don't
are
think that. Okay, so I
and fish
already
are
posted
animals.
a
Are fish not
citation.
animals? Are fish not?
Yeah, fish are animals.
Okay,
Yeah, but
so
I think I think they're sentient, so I wouldn't be fine with that. Like I said,
you're
like
changing your
I
position
I
then.
no look, this is my
Aquaculture.
position. I'd clarify my view. I said I have those 2 axioms. It has to meet the ecological one as far as as we can, right? And it has to reduce harm as much as we can. And look, like you can try to push that bar and like make me sound absurd and say like, oh well, you can just kill yourself. Well, like
No,
I don't think so.
nobody's inferring that. All I'm
Okay.
saying is that aquaculture is designed in order to provide food for human beings in the form of fish, which you're in agreement.
No, they're sentient.
So why did you say that you supported aquaculture?
No, look, I prefer those systems over other systems. Like I would way rather. So look, if you give me a choice between a system that we're holding killing sentient life, we're holding that equal. I'm gonna choose the one that has less ecological impacts. And likewise, if you hold the ecological impacts equal, I'm gonna choose the one that kills less sentient life. But again, like I would prefer that both of those are met ideally.
Okay, and so what's the baseline? What's the threshold here?
The threshold, well, I think we should be in principle striving to reach 0, but like my actual actions are going to be derived on like what the state of the system is at and what the best choice that we can be making is. So like if you show me that, hey look, this hemp protein that you bought, it's causing a massive amount of ecological damage, you could probably push me off of buying that product.
Mm-hmm. Is it your opinion that most vegans are living ethically?
So when you say ethically, like I just take that to mean, are they acting? I don't think they're acting in full knowledge of the scope of their food choices, and I think that we should be. I think that vegans widely are criticized for this by non-vegans. Like you hear this all the time. Like a vegan who buys a shirt that comes from a sweatshop or just bought a brand new car or something. Like I think that those decisions are widely criticized, and I for the most part, I actually agree with those criticisms.
Well, I'm strictly referring to their food choices.
So let's just take like monocropped grains as like a baseline. So I do think that there's a lot of harm that comes from those grains, right? Like the insect population is dying off, which is affecting wild bird populations on a mass scale. I think that if vegans really were going to go deeper, right? Like look, like they have a point, right? Like it seems like watching a pig get stunned in the head 9 times before it dies, as it's screaming, like that's probably a bad thing, and most people would be like, okay, like that shouldn't be happening. Like they do have a point. I don't think that they're acting completely ethically. Like I don't know. Like I don't think any of us can 100% be
Well,
achieving our moral principle. But that's like a
right. I
trivial
would
point. Like
agree with that point, that example that you just gave, but you don't have to go to the worst case scenario. That doesn't get you to veganism, does it? Just at most, at best, it would be an argument against practice.
yeah, like so in principle, you can hold moral axioms, and then in reality, you might be able to achieve like 99% of your maxim, but like you'll always fail that for that 1% to actually actualize your moral principles. I don't think that we actually can really pragmatically reach 100%. So in that sense, like everyone would be acting unethically, right? But like we just have to try our best to follow our moral
Right.
moral
What
axioms.
my main contention is, how do you get to veganism being a moral imperative?
So I was thinking about this earlier today, and I was really looking at the scope of these issues. It's a mass. There's to actually conceive of how big the issues are today in the world. Not just animal death. We're talking all the wars. We're talking all the pollution. Everything combined. It has to be looked at as we should be shifting, right? We should be with the end target to actually achieve whatever, like you want to call it, world peace or whatever. But we have to start looking at it as a gradient, as our actions are shifting closer and closer towards that ideal world, whatever you want to look at that as, like a vegan world or world peace or a world with no cancer, a world with no child exploitation, child labor.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So I think it is, in a sense, like a gradient. We should be like, I think that all of us reducing our impact as far as we can and shifting and making better and better choices as we learn more, right? That's going to be proportional to education. It's going to be proportional to access to better foods, access to knowledge.
Right, but what hasn't been substantiated is that veganism is the right shift. It's a shift in the right direction, as opposed to what I'm doing or what SD is doing, or any other ethically conscious omnivore.
Well, like, so the sentiment there, I can agree with, like but again, I don't think, I think you have a lot more limitations inevitably. I mean, I posted above here, like grass grazing cattle. There's actually no evidence that they're actually offsetting any of their own emissions. The carbon sequestration is actually not at high enough levels to even
Is there
counteract anything.
a study? And when
It's
was
a
that
hundred.
study?
Yeah, 127-page report.
When was that study conducted?
I can look it up here. It's just a couple of years ago, I believe.
Right. So the most recent evidence actually contradicts that. So, which is the study from 2018.
What's the study?
I can post it 1 minute.
And just to be clear, like I don't think that the newest evidence is necessarily the best evidence, because we could just conduct a shitty study tomorrow, and
Well,
I think we have to be critical of.
a refutation of the claims made in this. I posted it in the VC text.
Okay, this was 2017. Grazed and Confused. I posted them in general chat. I don't know where everyone else is.
We're in
They're
VC
VC
text.
text.
It's not like a huge big deal. I've made sure that everybody's links are visible on the recording, but we're recording in VC text. I hop back and forth to make sure that anybody else's links are into it.
So, would it be a fair assumption then that whatever you posted obviously hasn't taken into account what I just posted? Right?
Yeah. No, I'm reading it. There are some issues. So when you look at these kind of life cycle analysis, a lot of the time they're just estimating the greenhouse gas emissions, and a new report that was recently released actually shows that we've been vastly underestimating the amount of methane released, the amount of carbon released, by up to 100-fold.
I'm just concerned if you can refute what's stated in this.
Right. No. Well, I'm actually reading it right now. I just want, in general, like, so things like putting the methane sensors across the road, where you're going to have a lot of dilution. You're not going to be getting accurate readings. This, like, the numbers that we've been estimating, again, like, up to 100-fold
Do you have
lower than what's actually in the
I
atmosphere.
think I'd rather a study that refutes this one. I don't. I mean, you're just saying that you think that this or you think that that. I don't think that that's a refutation of what's posted there. You're just basically guessing. So just guesswork. Isn't that right?
Sorry, I'm just reading it. I don't have a response yet. I'm going through.
Okay.
But I'd also like you to read
Rice one of the most
the one that I posted.
I'm
I can
sorry.
post the summary too if that's too long.
But,
It's only 8. The summary's only 8 pages.
Yeah, but like I said, what you posted doesn't take into account the study that I just posted.
Right.
This is more recent information.
Right. So yours was a 4-year study. Again, started before the one that I posted was released. I know that ours are 1 year apart, but like yours didn't take into account what the one I posted.
Yeah, but it's not about taking into account what because your study is supposed to be a refutation of this method of agriculture, right? I don't think it works the other way around.
And look, like in theory, right? We have a cow. Let's say we have 20 cattle. Each of them is 1 million calories, correct? So we have 20 million calories, and we have a pasture. The cows are eating a lot, and I mean, of course, they're pooping a lot, and they're putting a little bit back on the top, but the grass didn't really go that deep, right? It might go half a foot. It might go a foot or maybe even 2 feet deep, but it's not even, the grass has an ecological purpose to pull some nutrients from deeper down. But again, like the most efficient and productive like plants are going to be trees, like chestnut trees, who their roots go like 20, 30, 40, 50 feet down. They're pulling up really deep nutrients, and then the chestnuts fall and
Yeah,
you get all of that. You get much more soil building than like a
I
cow.
understand what
Nutrients
you're trying to
half a foot
say.
down.
What are you trying to say with this argument?
Yeah, that well, if cows, the land wants to be a forest, that's the most productive in terms of soil sequestration.
So, yeah, but that's, I mean, the distinction here is that these animals are converting useless, vegetation into high quality protein for us to consume.
It's not.
Trees,
Well, look, if it can have grass, then it can have shrubs, and then after it has shrubs, you have more water retention, and then you have forests coming. Like the land, ultimately, what it is trying to do is become a forest. But if the cows are eating all of the
hold on,
seedlings,
grassland is trying to become forest?
yeah,
I don't.
land ideally wants to become a forest. It always trends towards
Natural,
building. Yeah, like if
grassland, like in the Canadian prairies,
right,
where there
and
have
if
never been trees for
look like
many years. I don't understand how you're getting to this conclusion.
yeah, look like shrubs eventually want to come in, and you see this
What?
after we deforest. You see the very small saplings come in, and you see, like, if you don't have this, then you're going to have a lot of erosion. So these prevent erosion, and again, right, if you built up the soil to a large extent,
And these animals are building up the soil.
so if right, if the grass-fed beef is actually achieving what it says it's doing, which is building the topsoil, you're going to have soil that's strong enough to have a forest, right? So like eventually, right?
Yeah, and that would that would get rid of part of our food source. So I don't know.
Right, but like, let's say we have a pasture, and let's say that what you're saying is true, that the grass-fed beef is replenishing the soil to a large extent, that now the soil is incredibly fertile. We can have it could be something else other than a pasture, right? Essentially. So then we'd be phasing out all pastures on the planet if what you're saying is true.
Well, we wouldn't, because there's also silvopasture.
Yeah, there's silvopasture too, and like with that, I'd look, if you gave me two options, I would choose the silvopasture versus the just like blank slate of just only grass, and any kind of shrub that pops up the cow immediately devours.
Well, there doesn't seem to be a problem with that either, as long as the topsoil is being rebuilt and replenished.
Anyway, what are the figures here from the study you posted?
Well, I mean, you said that you were reading it, right? So.
Yeah, like, well, so just to spring this on me during a debate, like,
okay, well,
I mean,
that's
I
fine.
gave you an eight-page summary, but I
well, you asked
quoted
me
like the part that.
Right, but like I said, that study doesn't take into account the one that I posted, so it's kind of irrelevant.
I would agree that if it's a study that he hasn't seen, to ask him to consider it in a discussion like this on the spot would be unreasonable. No, I know you weren't asking him to do that. So.
Yeah. Anyway, so
Wait, I'm just reading the conclusion. The conclusion is that it may serve as an overall greenhouse gas sink. but it's unclear. Okay, so your own conclusion is saying that it's unclear how long that effect. It's saying it may observe this effect. It's unclear.
That's fine. That's fine because nothing is guaranteed. We don't know. We can't predict the future. We don't know what future innovations will come about.
Okay, so it's essentially saying like they're hypothesizing about the future. So okay, so my report actually concluded that it was not achieving this maxim.
No, but we all hypothesize about the future. I guess that's it.
I think he's trying to speak. He's.
I'm just reading. I'm still reading.
No, okay.
Like I'd really have to do like I'd really have to go into
that's fine.
Deep data dive on this. Like I can, and I'll get back to you.
Okay, that's.
But did you even like click on the summary I posted? I can also send the quote.
If you insist, I'll look
so I gave an 8-page summary, but I also shared in general text the full 127-page report. Grazing Confused says there's no evidence that grass grazing cattle will make a difference, and even under the best conditions, carbon sequestration is not at levels high enough to counteract the ruminant's own emissions. So you might established. So you might have like a level of carbon sequestration, right? You can like if this report shows that it says it here, right? It says they observed some amount of carbon sequestration. Okay, fine, but like what the question is that what we need to know is it offset by the ruminant's own emissions,
and that's exactly why it's important that to note that it doesn't take into account the study that I just posted, which claims that it does generate a carbon sink.
Yeah, so in this own conclusion of the study, it's saying studies suggest that intensification of beef production systems would significantly reduce greenhouse gas emissions. All that's saying is grain-fed release less methane, and most people agree.
Okay, okay.
But again, so they're countering that by saying, they illustrate in this paper that grass-based beef would actually delivers environmental benefits such as some amount of sequestrations. Like we know that there's going to be some amount. Like
but in this specific paper, they're claiming a carbon sink, a net negative impact.
No, they're not claiming.
They're claiming. Well, to the best inference given the data.
Well, I can quote the part where they actually say they're hypothesizing that. So like again, like further research is actually needed, right? But unfortunately, like that data is like
including the study that you cited about the ants having personhood or having metacognition. More evidence needed.
What's the relevance?
Well, why are you mentioning that they claim that more research is needed? Was that supposed to refute the study, the claims in the study?
So, actually, what's interesting is it seems like the actual evidence here is leaning in my favor. Like, if you actually pull up my study,
it's
look, I can grant. I'm basically granting what the study says. Like, I'm granting what your study says. There's some amount of carbon sequestration. It's unclear if that's offset. So I provided a citation to show that it's actually not, and there's no evidence that it.
Right, and I provided. Okay, right.
But that's important.
That there's a carbon sink.
Do you agree that it would be important that the actual ruminants' emissions are offset by how much?
Yeah, and that's what they claim in the study, which you haven't refuted. I'm sorry.
They didn't claim that. They did not claim that.
They did claim that, though. They did.
I'm just copying where they did not claim that.
Okay.
Jan, can you make sure to post that in VC text if you don't mind? So,
Yeah, for sure.
thank you.
Beyond, what does that quote read? Because that's directly from.
Yeah, so it's actually they say it may serve as an overall greenhouse. So they're just playing guesswork there, and then it's unclear. It's also unclear how long that effect would even be observed if there was an effect.
They made the claim emissions from the grazing system were offset completely by soil carbon sequestration. And with regards to the future, like I said, it's all conjecture. It's all hypothesizing.
We're going to grant some amount of soil sequestration, which is the claim in the paper. I agree with.
Okay, I posted a quote from the paper, so I mean. Either way, your claim about not knowing what the future holds is not a refutation. That can be said about anything.
So, look, that's just from the abstract. Like if you search offset and you click on the second one, it's saying that MP grazing has the potential to offset greenhouse gas emissions through carbon sequestration.
Yeah, as a implemented method of agriculture. Yeah, it does do that.
I'm just looking at the numbers. So they're not like here actually in the data. Like I don't know why they're saying that when in the conclusion they're saying that. In the conclusion they're not saying that. In the body they're not saying that. But in the abstract, the quote that you did, I don't know why you're just posting from the summary.
Yeah,
have you read this whole thing?
I have read it actually.
So what my argument is essentially is if we grant some amounts of soil sequestration, how do we know that's actually the best system, that's optimal, and that's actually going to save us
relative to what? Relative to what?
Relative to other polyculture systems, or like something like food forest, for example.
Can you define that, please? Food forest.
Food forests are I don't have like a formal definition, but there's like in permaculture, so there will be trophic layers. So you'll have trees in that system, and then you'll have everything down. The trees actually provide shade for other crops, so you can have a diversity of crops. And these layerings build the soil, protect the soil, and prevent it from things like.
Well, I don't see the issue with having a two-pronged approach to it with pasture-raised animals along with silver pasture.
Sure, like, so if you want to have, I mean, you can't have like a chicken running around your silver. So if you have a cow running around your food forest, like, look, I'm not, like, ethically, I'm not opposed to having a cow. You rescue that cow, it's running around the pasture, but like, I don't understand where, like, if the cow is actually doing an ecological good, like, if the cow is sequestering carbon, like, wouldn't it be wrong to kill it?
Why? Why?
If the cow's doing a net good, which is the claim, right? Then why would you kill it?
The cow also does a net good in the form of providing meat
Yeah, so you're essentially saying like, fuck this ecological benefit, which you perceive it as
Well,
a
no,
it's a
because
net
the cow
good.
will be replaced by another cow.
So, like, okay, so, like, you realize what would your answer be if I named the trait on them?
Oh God. Do you have a answer, or are we just gonna forget that and just jump into name the trait?
Well, I mean, look, like, so I'm wondering why, if a being is good for the environment, that it would be justified to kill and replace them. That's the claim, right? I don't
I
think
don't
it's like
see why
I
the
don't think it's
fact that
jumping.
that it's good for the environment should be an argument for why one shouldn't slaughter and consume it. It provides a good also in the form of its meat.
Well, I mean, like, unfortunately, this is like very hard to name the trait because I don't think that in the as a general heuristic that humans are good for the environment. So it's hard to name the trait because I think
Okay.
humans have a net negative on the environment.
Yeah, but being good for the environment is not a trait that I think is morally relevant with respect to whether a being should live or not.
Well, I mean, so what you're saying is killing them is inconsequential because we'll replace them. I mean, I could say that about what, like a rainforest. Just bulldoze the rainforest; it'll grow back.
Okay, well, would the ecological effects be the same?
And like people make this, well, we could hold that equal, right? Or we could just draw the conclusion, which is like I hear this a lot too much. I hear this way too much. If we destroy our planet, don't worry, we can just go to Mars. It'll just be inconsequential that we destroy our own planet because we can just create another biome on Mars.
Well, no, because what would destroying our planet imply? Would it come at a detriment to our own existence?
Let's just say it's inconsequential. Let's just say that humanity can just migrate to Mars.
So there are absolutely zero negative consequences at all to us.
Well, I mean, the Earth would be destroyed. That's if you perceive that as negative.
The Earth devoid of human beings, of moral agents. I mean, why should we value? Do you value some planet in a far off system?
I think. Well, I think they have value in and of themselves. Yeah.
A planet has value just
a planet
for existing.
Well, look, like okay, so if you want to get really like technical with it, I don't know what that planet, if that planet is offsetting some gravity or something. Like if you remove that planet,
But you just said that it's inconsequential. You just said that.
Well, look, like if you remove that planet, just blinked it out of existence, what if some asteroids changed trajectory or something? Or that, I don't know. I know Uranus does that, right? Like I know Uranus keeps it actually protects the Earth. Uranus keeps asteroids away from our planet.
You just stipulated that it was inconsequential. You can't then add in consequences post hoc.
Well, yeah, I mean, if the planet, if there's no consequences from blinking a planet out of existence, and that planet is completely uninhabited and there's no life on that planet, yeah, I don't see why there would be a problem if it's inconsequential.
But that's the exact hypothetical that you just posed to me. So why would you pose a hypothetical that is essentially useless?
Well, look, I just hear this argument a lot, and in practice, I don't think we're going to achieve that. But if someone's willing to say, yeah, like fuck Earth, let's move to Mars, I look at that as insane. I think that if we have a species that's doing an ecological good, we should probably value them, and just killing them because they're replaceable doesn't seem like a satisfactory reason to me, at least.
It doesn't seem like, well, I don't see why it wouldn't. If you're claiming that the fact that they one can derive a net good from that being is something that we should seek to value. Well, I value the fact that I derive net well-being through the form of eating this animal, so, and I value that. So, I mean, I don't see the symmetry breaker there.
Okay. On that note, Lizzie, do you want to make any final points? I realise you just said the last sentence there, Nick and Beyond. Do you want to say anything about that? Because if you guys are willing, I'm still recording, by the way. If you would like, we can open it up to questions from the chat. That is entirely up to you guys. You don't have to by any means.
Sure, I'm okay with that.
So yeah, I mean, the conversation kind of went to an area that I don't really have much to say about. I don't think the question about whether it's better or worse for the environment is really relevant to the moral issue of whether we should do it, or whether we should kill animals or not. But yeah, I mean, like, we didn't really cover so much the distinction that the main point of contention that I had with Lizzie. It seemed was that I was claiming that even though it violated the doctrine of double effect, poisoning animals to protect your farmland was still not, was still within the bounds of something that would be not the most, not completely prohibited under kind of a minimalistic moral position, which is what I claim veganism to be. But I mean, so we can definitely talk about that at some point, either now or in the future. But yeah,
Nick,
I'm
are
open to
you using
whatever.
a proprietary definition of that doctrine? Because we both agreed that it doesn't comply.
Right. We both agree that it does not apply to St. Thomas Aquinas's formulation of the doctrine of double effect.
Yeah, so why are you still appealing to it?
Oh, because I think that it provides a nice groundwork for my position. I think my position is a bit more stringent than Aquinas's is, but I think that you have to be more stringent when you're dealing with issues pertaining to animals because of how bleak their situation is. We don't have the
Well, it
luxury of
doesn't. It
applying the
doesn't
doctrine of double
apply.
effect. All right, second.
Exactly. It doesn't. I mean, it can be used as a groundwork for your argument if it undermines your argument.
No, it doesn't undermine it. It actually points in an interest in the same direction that mine points into, which is the idea that if you're using someone as a means to an end, that makes the action more morally heinous than if they're killed as a bystander or as collateral damage. And in that case, my argument is symmetrical with Aquinas's.
Okay, with this, thank you very much. Beyond, would you like to make any sort of closing statements? And you're more than welcome to stay around for Q&A. I think a few people want to ask you some things, actually.
Yeah, so my view is just that we should be minimizing our impacts on the environment and minimizing our impacts on sentient life. And I think that our consumer choices, whether they're diet related or not, should be in accordance with those. And I'm unconvinced. I will read this paper. I hope Lizzie also reads mine and doesn't just dismiss it because she thinks it didn't take into account anything that her paper took into account. Because likewise, I can make the same objection that we can actually have a follow-up on that. And I'd like to discuss it further currently, I'm not convinced there is evidence. And look, if there is evidence, right? Like, I don't even know if that would even be my goalpost, because I think we could be doing much more for the environment to reduce the burden on the environment. So if this might be negligible to other systems which are far more efficient and optimal for the ecosystem.
Thank you very much. Are you cool with staying for a couple of questions? Not from me, from just members of the chat. Is that okay with you guys? I can stop the recording if you want me to stop it here.
Sure, that's cool.
Yeah, no, I'll keep the recording going if people want to ask questions. I think it'd be interesting.
Yeah, fair, good, good idea. So we have Paddy Politics in the chat, and I'm sure many of you will already be familiar with her. She wanted to ask a question. Paddy, are you with us? I guess not right now. Who else had a question? Let me just scroll up in the chat.
Maybe could I ask a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so this question is for Beyond or Nick. I'm not sure what answer Nick would give. I think I know what answer Beyond would give, but I wanted to discuss this a little bit if we could. Do you think that it is morally worse to kill 5 cows than to kill 1 cow in a vacuum?
That was to Nick or Beyond. Either of you.
Well, I'll just say, yeah, it's going to be worse to kill 5 cows versus 1 cow in a vacuum.
Okay, and why is that? What exactly is the reason for that?
Well, I mean, when I say moral wrong as a subjectivist, I just take that to mean according to my preferences. I derive it from my preferences, so it's going to be unpreferable if I had to choose between those two, to pick the one with 5 times more death.
Okay, do you think that death in a vacuum is necessarily something wrong?
Yeah, well, I mean, a death of a sentient creature.
Yeah, like let's say it's a sentient creature and it doesn't know that it is about to be killed. And just by death, I just mean that its sentience is removed instantly.
Are you sure you're supposed to be asking me this? Like, what about Michelle Lowe?
Well, hold on, because I know that you take the opposite position of Michelle, so I want to see what defense you have against her position. So
Sure, yeah, go for it.
yeah, so you're saying that it is worse to kill 5 cows in a vacuum than to kill 1 cow. Is it because there's like a greater amount of something that you believe is negative in one case than the other case? Is that why you have that preference?
Yeah.
Okay, so let me give you another example, because I think this is a reductio on that position. So let's say that you can choose between somebody in a vacuum being stabbed and beaten up, or you can choose another vacuum where there are 100 people who get punched in the stomach. Do you have a preference in one case or the other here?
Oh, okay. I know where this is going. So, yeah. Well, look. At some point, like if someone's getting punched in the stomach or pinpricked, right? Like if we took 1 million people getting pinpricked, would that surmount the suffering of one person getting tortured or killed, right? Is that sort of where it leads?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like if your preference is based on some calculation on choosing the option in the vacuum with less total suffering, then eventually, if you hold that position, then you'll have to commit to saying that I prefer, and that you'd have to say, I prefer that one person get tortured compared to an infinite amount of people getting flicked in the ear once, or not even an infinite amount. Like there's some finite number at which that will end up becoming greater. Like just mathematically, it will have to do that if we consider that the negative utility of someone getting flicked in the ear is not zero.
Yeah, I think that the category of suffering differs, and I don't think that there's any amount of pinpricks that can overpower, like, that's, you could call that, I don't know if you could even call that suffering, but like let's say you call it very, very soft or rudimentary and minimal suffering.
We
I
could
don't
call it
think
like
that,
negative utility.
yeah, well, I'm not a negative utilitarian, but yeah, sure, let's call it negative utility. Um, I think that since it's in a different category, it can never overpower any amount of hard suffering.
Ah, hard suffering. Ah, that's my favorite word. So are you making like a deontic rule here that you're
Yeah.
saying if one suffering is so much more significant than the other, then there's no point at which one will outweigh the other despite how many people there are in the second group?
Sorry, I, I shouldn't be reading chat. What was the question?
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, so you're saying that if the one person's net negative utility is very significant in comparison to the net negative utility that an individual in the group of many experiences, that if that difference is significant enough, then despite a very large amount of people in the second group, that group could never be made large enough to change your preference.
Yeah, like if the individual suffering is negligible, then like before going to the net suffering, we write that off.
That would apply to cows.
Yeah,
Sorry.
so like how do you make this how do you make this decision? Like it sounds like you're making a deontic rule that you're saying that if the net negative utility is below a certain amount or is like a certain percentage of what the greater net negative utility is, then it's not considered. Like how do you come to that conclusion?
Well, I mean, the way that I look at it is if on the local level we have one person who's being tortured to death compared to one person who's getting finger pricked, again, like the suffering is just in a different category. The amount of well-being decreases categorically differ. It categorically differs, and yeah, you can make some kind of rural utilitarian, uh, like you might be able to produce just a rule and cash it out in whatever meta or normative ethic you ascribe to. And then when we go to these large cases of infinity, right, an infinite amount of people getting pinpricked, I don't, yeah, I don't think it can ever overpower one person being tortured to death.
Yeah, so in this specific case where you have like one person who has something much worse happening to them compared to many people who have a not as bad thing happening to each of them individually, we take a look at what the worst thing that is being experienced, and we're saying that that is preferable. Why do we not hold that position when we're comparing killing one cow to killing 5 cows? Because in each of those cases, like whether we're killing one cow or killing 5 cows, the worst thing that is happening to them is they are being killed. So why are we saying that killing the 5 is worse than killing the one? Because that sounds like in this case we are making some utilitarian calculus that we're saying there is more of the bad in this case, but why don't we hold that same view for when we're comparing the one person being badly hurt to many people being lightly hurt?
Well, if the category, like if the way that you're killing them is held equal, I'm going to choose the one that, like if you had one person being pinpricked versus two, I'm going to choose the lesser, right? But if you have different kinds of suffering, different kinds of exploitation or harm, then I'm going to, like, if they differ in categories, then they have to be weighted differently.
Do you mind if I like kind of insert something here?
Yeah.
Could I just add one more thing before I hear Nick's take? I just want to hear Beyond's thoughts on this last question, slightly related. So
Sure.
it seems like you're
Go
saying
on
that
then, but make sure it's to the point.
if the negative action that is being performed is the same across all the individuals in both groups, then we do just a net overall calculation. But if there are different experiences between both of the groups, then it's as if there were different variables and we have to treat them in a different way. So it does, is there some case in which you would choose a, you would think that it would be okay? So let me put out the situation first. So there's one person who gets like punched 5 times and stabbed, compared to some amount of people being punched 5 times. Like, is there a certain point at which you'd say, okay, I would prefer to have this one person punched 5 times and stabbed, in comparison to some very large amount of people each getting punched 5 times? Or would you, or in a case like that where the negative utility experienced by the individuals in both groups, where the negative utility experience in both groups is similar, would it be in any case preferable to have the worst situation to the individual happen over the not as bad situation to the many people? Would you ever change your mind if the negative utility is similar between the individuals in both groups but not equal?
Right. So this, I mean, just to clarify, you said there's one person who's being punched in the face 5 times and then like stabbed. Like, it's not a mortal wound or anything. It would quantify as suffering though. Like comparable, or is it incomparable to being punched in the face? Like they'd actually die.
Well, like, let's say they don't die, like they're just stabbed in the stomach. It just hurts.
Yeah, then I think that absolutely there's going to be a point at which people getting punched in the face would actually overpower. I think that kind of suffering, it's in the same category, but it's just far greater. Like getting stabbed is obviously like far worse than getting punched 5 times. I don't know by how much worse. Like it might be hundreds and hundreds of people, right? That might actually, you could reach that threshold. Like let's say it's like 400 or 500 people, like each getting like punched like hard in the face versus just this one guy getting punched hard in the face and then stabbed. Yeah, at some point, the actual harm is going to be equal. So I don't know where that is. Like I don't have any calculus on that, but yeah, in general, my answer would be yeah. There's going to be some point.
Okay, yeah, like to me, intuitively, that makes sense. I think intuitively, I hold a similar position to that, but Nathan has been pushing me off that a little bit. I don't know if you wanted to add anything, or if Nick, or if we could hear what Nick wanted to.
Hey Nick, are you there?
Oh yeah, I'm still here.
Yeah, Nick, you go right ahead. And,
Yeah. So I like this I like this this thought experiment you did, Veggies, where you looked at so essentially, you know, the moral position when you're weighing two different sides. I think what makes the most sense, given the value of each individual, is having, essentially you should treat every individual as having infinite worth, and so if so it's really kind of the maximum amount of suffering that an individual in either, whichever, like the max suffering of either of the individual in each group, whichever one's greater, that's the one that's the greater violation. But then when you're dealing with multiple individuals experiencing the same degree of violation, then you can't really just add it up like apples, because I think that commodifies the value of sentient life, and I don't think that's I think that's a real mistake to do that. So certainly when you're dealing with death, that's kind of the problem you run into. Killing one individual versus killing two, you can't really, the maximum suffering in each group is going to be death. So it's not, it doesn't, I don't think it really makes sense to add up the deaths on one side and say that's worse than the other, especially because whenever you're dealing with something that's motivated, an action, you have to really ask the question of what is the intent behind the action. So in your hypothetical, you really haven't done that. You sort of said, in a vacuum, what's worse, killing one individual or killing 5 individuals, but you haven't answered why are you doing it. Does your hypothetical allow for this question? Like, do you have a reason why this individual is killing 1 or killing 5?
Yeah, like I'm just saying in a vacuum because I think if we try to bring a situation like this into the real world, and there are just so many factors in play. And I think that even people who hold the view that in a vacuum killing 1 would be equally morally wrong to killing 5 in a vacuum, that if this was brought into the real world, then they would probably say, okay, in this case, killing 1 would be preferable. But as for an intention, yeah, I don't have any, like I'm just saying, just in the vacuum, just is the action of ending the sentience of 1 being and the action of immediately ending the sentience of 5 beings all done in a vacuum, are those actions morally equivalent? So there's no intention or anything in this, just looking at the action itself, which might be maybe a bit too much of an abstraction to get a lot of meaning for understanding the morality of the situation. But yeah, it's just trying to remove it from other confounding factors, I guess.
So the way I see it is that morality is it's a constraint that's put upon people from acting in accordance to their personal biases. This kind of speaks to something that Lizzie, who was asking about earlier, about what's wrong with speciesism, what's wrong with favoring your own group over other groups, and I think it's the same thing that's wrong with, let's say, a judge recognizing they're biased in favor of one party over the other, and then ruling in favor of that party commensurate with their bias. I think that it's the role of morality to make sure that we're just, that we resist our biases. And when it comes to when it comes to the constraint that when it comes to that constraint, if you're going to allow some sort of selfish motivation, for example, let's just put that in there as the reason why you're doing the killing, and the selfish motivation could even be to help out someone to help someone else out, because ultimately you're doing something on behalf of someone else's selfish desire, but it's still based upon a selfish desire because it's not based upon a moral motivation, which is justice, which doesn't factor in, which controls for bias. So if you're gonna kill one individual for some sort of utilitarian purpose, then you've pretty much removed that constraint. You're basically, morality is no longer really applying for you if you're gonna actually go to the lengths of killing one individual. And at that point, the number of individuals you kill is kind of immaterial because you've already removed that constraint. You're no longer operating on any sort of a metric of justice at all. You're not acting like a moral agent anymore, or you're ignoring your moral obligations altogether. Whether you kill one individual or 1,000, it's not. You're not acting any more immorally in one or the other. You've ceased acting immorally after that first kill, and that's the reason why what I've observed working in laboratories is that when people kill when they may have their first victim and kill the first animal, that's when they feel terribly guilty about it. But over time, they start killing more and more and more, and it doesn't even move the needle at all. There isn't any sort of guilt associated with it. I think that's what generally we find in people that kill animals for food as well. So yeah, I think it's certainly a mistake to say that it's wrong. It's more wrong to kill 5 or 1. I think the moment you've allowed yourself to commit murder, you're ignoring morality altogether. And I just want to add one more kind of caveat. This doesn't mean that you shouldn't save a lesser number over a greater number. So certainly, in the case of like a burning building and you can either choose to save 1 cow or 5 cows, of course, you should save the 5 over the 1. And in a situation where you have to kill 1 or kill 5, or all 6 will be killed, then if you choose to shoot the 1, which I think you should do, you're not actually killing that individual because that individual is already doomed by the situation. So that is just simply choosing the lesser of 2 evils and not a case of actual murder. You're not actually committing murder in that case, even if you're pulling the trigger. That's basically my kind of summed up answer.
All right, that's sweet. Yeah, thank you both for your answers and for your time, and thank you for hosting this.
Can I just say something real quick?
Yeah, of course, Lizzie.
Yeah, Nick, I don't think that's a fair representation of my argument to say that speciesism would lead to some unfair treatment within court cases and judges. I mean,
Oh no, I was just simply making what I thought was an equivalency of the two, but I certainly don't think that you would necessarily make the same equivalency necessarily. I was just simply saying that I would interpret the question, why not favor your own species over others, to be similar to a judge favoring their own family member over a non-family member.
well, I don't think that's the case because my position is contingent on the broader view. When taking a broader view, when someone else taking a broader view hurts your argument, you seem to zoom way into the finely calculated details, about judges and court cases, which I don't think is accurate.
Oh yeah, sure. No, I just put it out there. I mean, I knew that you would find some objection to it, and that's kind of what I was hoping. Because obviously, my goal, Lizzie, is to convince you to be a vegan. It's not to say something you're not going to agree with, and then like, oh man, Nick's not saying stuff I don't agree with, and that's the end. No, we have to talk it.
Okay. I guess we can go on to the next question, SD. SD?
I saw someone in chat asked a question to me, and I
Yeah, Wolf asked you a question.
yeah, I see this. It goes, what does sentientism say about pregnant women taking drugs during early pregnancy, which would delay the sentience of children, which further results with insentient babies? They are not sentient yet, neither they were sentient in the past. Would it be immoral for women to slice their throats? Would it be immoral for women to use them for food or something else? Okay, so I guess it's a very hypothetical question where a pregnant woman could take a drug, and then the child would never develop sentience and would be born essentially in a persistent vegetative state. Is that basically what we're talking about? A wolf. Okay, all right. I'm gonna assume that's what wolf meant. Yeah, I think I probably have to bite the bullet on that one. Actually, that's an interesting. It certainly is counterintuitive to say that it'd be okay to use to use a baby for meat, but if the baby was never sentient, then it's really hard to argue that there's a moral violation in that case. So I generally look at moral value as starting at the moment that free will develops, and free will develops at the moment when sentience occurs, and I'm willing to be as conservative as possible when it comes to when that might happen, because I think we should err on the side of caution. So this might happen in the first several weeks of pregnancy, which would make anything other than the morning after pill to be an immoral action of killing a sentient being. But if you could theoretically keep that fetus from ever developing a cortex, then I don't see any moral problem, as icky as it seems, to bring that, to kill the baby after birth. I don't know. What do you think, Beyond? It's an interesting question. I don't think I've ever actually thought about that hypothetical before. What do you think, Beyond?
Can I just
Well,
chip in just before Beyond does, and he'll have every opportunity to respond as always. But I mean, like questions that morally dumbfound, yeah, they're plentiful. You can get questions that you've never considered before, and you think, oh shit, like, I mean, what if that happened? What would my objection actually be? I mean, that's where you're coming from, right, Nick?
It's a good one, I gotta say. I've thought about a lot of hypotheticals, and yet this one somehow never, eluded me. I never thought of the idea of a drug that would make sentience never develop, and then you'd still have the baby. It's an interesting.
But would you, like, I have to ask this, like, would you base your life around that hypothetical drug that didn't actually exist yet and therefore couldn't do anything?
I think these questions of moral dumbfounding are always tricky, and I think that, and I think that the way to address them is to try to kind of look at what one's most deep, their deepest intuition is. I think some of our intuitions are similar to unconditioned stimulus. So like kind of similar to like an electric shock, that you shock someone and it hurts. It's like you don't have to teach someone that a shock hurts; it just hurts. And then other things can actually be predictive of something that you like. So for example, if you flash a light before you shock someone, then eventually that light will have this intuition. Oh, I don't like that light. You'll recoil from the light. But so I think the goal in identifying what intuition to kind of double down on, or to base an axiom on, is whether it's more like the light response or more like the shock response. And I would argue that the intuition that it's wrong to, let's say, kill a baby is probably more of a conditioned response, given the fact that babies tend to be sentient.
Babies tend to be sentient. I'm not actually sure about that.
Well, they seem to, they cry when you slap them, and they very early on they start, they giggle when you tickle. Even very early on, they can laugh. So like
Isn't that the difference between somatic and episodic memory?
Someone asked me a question not too long ago about whether memory is required for a true, high value qualia, the sort of qualia that gives life meaning, and that makes even painless killing of someone to be an egregious moral. And I think that probably there is something to be said for that if you don't have the capacity for an episodic memory, then you've less to lose when you die, or that you're unable to experience, the sort of states of bliss and joy, such as love, that you can experience if you do have those episodic memories. So
Right, I would grant that. I think if you don't get to come of an age when you can experience such emotions as you described, like love and all those other things, yes, you wouldn't get to experience them. But what if you snuff the life out before that?
You mean like from like so clearly, I think once you have the capacity to experience pain, you certainly have people have a moral obligation not to cause you that. And I don't know, can a baby feel joy? Or does the
I
potential
don't
for
think
baby
so. Well, joy,
yeah.
sure.
Well, I don't know. But when I talk about joy, I think your initial response is what I was kind of going for, which is the sort of feeling you get when you like feel deep, interpersonal connection with someone that you're hugging, for example. Back when I used to run the monkey sanctuary, there was this little monkey, capuchin monkey, that would, like, whenever I left, she would just like spend hours just like screaming because I wasn't there. And the moment she saw me, she would like run up to me and just start like just chirping maniacally and just like grab onto me, and she's like just so incredibly loving. Is like the greatest thing in the world. I mean, I'm sure people have had dogs that do that. Cats don't tend to do that very much.
Absolutely. I've had dogs that do that. I can't say I've had monkeys, but dogs certainly. But how does that answer the question?
Well, I mean, so you certainly don't have to have language to be able to experience this deep, intimate connection that we generally would call love. This is actually what I was trying to refer to when I got cut off early on in this conversation with this experiment with these brain image dogs that activated the same areas of the brain when they were being hugged as their human companion activated when they were hugging their dog, and the human would describe it as a feeling of love. So you don't need language for that, but does a baby have it? I don't know.
Did somebody cut you off? Did you not get the opportunity to finish what you were saying? If that's the case, then by all means, go ahead and finish it now.
Oh no, that actually was the whole point. But no one cut me off. I mean, nature, God, I don't know. I was cut off by the computer. The internet system didn't want. The government didn't want me to say it. I don't know.
Yeah, it could be some conspiracy theory going on there. But, I mean, does anybody else have a question for Nick or Beyond? I mean, they've been kind enough, both of them, once again, to come into the server and be recorded and take questions. So I guess anybody.
Does Beyond or Lizzie want to respond to this interesting hypothetical that WLOF posted?
If you do, you can go right ahead.
If a fetus that develops into a child you've suppressed its sentience, it's never been sentient. I don't basically I take that to mean like no brain activity. Like if the baby is like there's actually a sickness. I forget what it's called, but a child is born without sentience.
Anencephaly.
Yeah, right. I don't know how you'd even argue against killing that baby unless like the mother cared, or if society cared, or there would be consequences like that. Like in a vacuum, I don't see what would be wrong with that.
Yeah, but Beyond, I think what I think made that question particularly interesting was that the mother is willfully causing the anencephaly before the baby even develops a cortex. So this baby would have been born sentient, but because of the mother's decision to want to exploit that baby for food or something, took this drug to make sure that it never developed a cortex throughout its entire development.
I mean, it might be distasteful, but I don't know how you'd argue against that ethically.
Yeah, so Beyond and I think have the same response to this. I think I would be willing to venture that Beyond probably would intuitively find it distasteful, kind of like, and there's a certain degree of moral dumbfounding when it comes to that. Correct me if I'm wrong, Beyond, but nonetheless, I think your deeper intuition is that it's morally acceptable to kill some being, or not to morally value a being that never developed sentience to begin with.
Yes, it's amoral.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's what your position commits you to, right?
Yeah. Do you agree with it?
I'm fine with it.
So I guess Lizzie, do you agree with it?
Yeah.
Oh, so all four of us agree with it. Look, we all agree. We can all butcher anencephalic babies.
Yeah, I mean, I have no problem with killing humans under certain circumstances, and that would be one of them.
I mean, you realize that the four of us are like in this extreme minority view. Like even in society, like they would all call us psychos.
Not necessarily.
Yeah, I agree. Not necessarily. It depends on how deep you are into the ethics.
I think these babies die usually within hours of being born.
I was mostly talking about Ben Shapiro, but okay.
Ben Shapiro, I'm not familiar with that.
Yeah, Ben Shapiro wouldn't like us saying that.
Anyway, I'm gonna hop out.
Fuck Ben
Is there any
Shapiro.
more questions though?
I don't think so.
No, it doesn't look like it at the moment. So if you want to hop out, that's fine.
All right. Thanks for having me on. This was another good one. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, no problem.
Thanks, Beyond. That was interesting.
Thank you. So Nick, you're gonna stick around for a few more questions?
Sure. If anyone has them, I know that Lizzie still was going to ask me a couple questions on the on that nuance of the St. Thomas Aquinas argument.
Yeah, I mean, you guys can by all means talk about that if you want to.
Yeah, Nick, you had mentioned you were talking about the doctrine of double effect and how it was used as a foundation for your argument. I wasn't able to understand how you were making that connection.
Okay, so the whole point of Aquinas introducing that argument, which of course you're familiar, was to try to address the difference in our intuition between using someone as a means to an end, and someone dying, even intentionally dying, as a byproduct of something we're doing. So generally in the trolley dilemma, the trolley dilemma generally is presented that you could kill one individual if is that would you kill one individual in order to save 5? But there's a nuance there that is generally not covered in the standard trolley dilemma, which is what if killing that individual was instrumental to saving the 5 individuals? So generally,
hang on, I'm sorry, I have to object. Isn't it the case with the trolley dilemma that you are not allowed any extra information?
Well, I mean, it's right. So
because
so
that would influence your answer, right? I mean, if you start adding in things like what if, and if this is the case and if that is the case, I mean, that could sway somebody's answer. Isn't the whole point of the trolley dilemma so that you can't have any extra info?
Well, I mean, the point of all these hypotheticals is try to tease out certain elements of our moral intuitions, and that's simply, the tridilemma is simply one variation of teasing out a specific type, a specific moral intuition to a specific scenario. In that particular case, though, the scenario that's being presented, the individual that's being killed is not being used as a means to an end.
Well, why don't you just present us with the trolley dilemma as you see it?
Okay, so the standard...
Because I already know what it is, but if I'm allowed extra information, then that's going to change my answer.
Right. I mean, so I presented... I think I've shown my picture before. Wait, let me read this.
No, yes, you have, yes. Not tonight, but you have done before. I acknowledge that.
Would it be fair to the people the trolley is already killed to divert it now? Huh. That's an interesting addition to the trolley.
But you're not allowed additions. That's the whole point.
Well, no, you're allowed to tweet. So you have the trolley dilemma, and that like, so it's kind of like, when you're designing a any sort of experiment, right? You do the first experiment, and then you get a certain response to it, and you're like, okay, well, was my response based upon, like, was it truthfully based upon what I think it is, or were there certain factors here that I didn't control for? So you create a control for that.
You're not allowed to know that. That's the whole point. That would be a horrible objection to the trolley dilemma.
No. The trolley dilemma is good, but then you have to, keep on doing variations so you can see what your responses are as you control for certain. So the trolley dilemma is like, it's sort of the vanilla. It's sort of like, it's the vanilla case, and then you're like, okay, well, did I respond this way because there's only 5 people? What if I made it 10 people? So let me do the same thing.
Yeah, no, you can't do that. You
Well, no,
can't. You can't say, "What if there was 10 people on the opposite track?" That's
Well,
a terrible
no,
objection.
no, it's not an objection. You're maintaining your response to that trolley dilemma. You're like, okay, I would kill one individual to save 5. Let's say. So then the question is, okay, well, would I kill one individual to save 10? Would I kill one individual to save 5 if I had to push the guy onto the track as opposed to pushing a lever? Would I kill one individual to save 5 if I had to use his organs to save 5 people?
Right.
In which case, I'm actually using him as a means to an end. Well, wait a second. If I'm using him as a means to an end by using his organs, that's kind of that's different than moving a lever. So let me try to think of a scenario of the trolley dilemma where I'm still pushing a lever, but I'm still using it as a means to an end. Hence the loop dilemma that was that was part of that figure that I sent before.
But yes, I remember you posting that. Yes.
But then you do the loop dilemma, and you're like, okay, so that's all fine, but what if you did the same thing, but you weren't using the guy as a means to an end? Well, what you could do is you go back to the original trolley dilemma, where the guy's not being used as a means to an end, or you could maintain almost the identical structure by simply putting like the loop, or you could put a rock downstream from the guy, and now you've essentially turned it into the original trolley dilemma because instead of the train going off the rails after hitting the guy, the train is hitting a rock. But it's essentially the exact same thing.
I think Veggies for Thought has posted something quite similar to the loop that you were talking about.
Oh no, that is the loop. That is the loop dilemma. Let's see.
Yeah, it's in VC text.
Now imagine. Let's look at that loop. Now imagine that I were to break the track downstream of the guy. Essentially, now I'm back at the trolley dilemma, right?
Sure, you've proved that moral dilemmas exist. Who would ever dispute that?
Right, but so instead of breaking the track downstream, which would essentially be the rock scenario, you can just put a rock there. But either way, now you've teased apart this question of using someone as a means to an end versus that person dying in collateral damage. In this case, with a loop, the person's being used as a means to an end. But if you break the track like the original trolley dilemma, or you put a rock downstream from the guy, then it turns into using that the guy is not being used. It's collateral damage.
Okay, and collateral damage is better than deliberate damage?
Well, they're both deliberate because in both cases you're foreseeing the death from your action.
Direct and indirect.
Well, I mean, direct
is put it.
That's kind of a bit of,
yeah, you don't like that.
Well, I mean, direct can also be used to say, well, you're directly causing it in either case. It's more like in one case, the individual is being used as a means to an end, whereas the other one, they're not being used as a means to an end. Or one of them, you could say in the case where the means to end is used, they often use the word intended. Whereas when the case that the person's going to die as a result of your action, you can use the word foreseen. I mean, that's just the way people. I don't like that terminology, but that's one way that people have been using. That's how the way.
No, sure, I understand what you're saying there, but.
What's this stag trolley problem? Oh. Let's try this one. If both persons pull the lever, and the two empty trials will crash and no one dies, one person. Oh wait, this is a prisoner's dilemma. That's interesting. That's a really interesting. This is an interesting one. Wow, I never even thought of this one before.
I heard a good one. I think it was just yesterday. It was the I think Beyond posted it. It was the drowning person, and I admit that's a dilemma. But who the fuck would ever argue that it's not a dilemma? You know, the how far away are you from the drowning child thing? Like, do you have an obligation to go and save them?
Yeah, no, that is an interesting dilemma, and I've, I definitely I have several things like, 'cause as a pure deontologist, it's natural for me to have a problem with that sort of. By the way, have you seen the stag problem? Because I'd love to discuss this one. This is very interesting.
I have not. Go ahead and post it if you want.
Oh no, Veggie just posted it. I thought it was.
This is the what problem? Sorry, stag problem is what I thought I heard you say.
The stag trolley problem. Yeah, someone Veggie's posted. I've never seen it before, but but it actually, I thought it was a joke because it looks like a stag's antler, but it's actually not a joke. It's actually a real prisoner's dilemma problem.
Oh, okay. Let me just take a quick look at that. In the meantime, I think Lizzie wants to ask you another question. Lizzie, are you still here? If you are, you can go ahead.
No, it was for Beyond.
Ah, okay, fair enough. Right, so the stag trolley problem, I'm just going to read this out loud. I've got it on screen, so it's on the recording, no shade here. If both persons pull the lever, the two emptrons will crash and no one dies. If one person pulls whilst the other does not, 6 people die. If both do nothing, 2 people die. You are unable to communicate with the other person. Do you pull the lever? Interesting.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, no, that's a really hard one, man. Like, Veggies, what would you do?
I think I'd pull it, but that's pretty risky. I'd hope the other person would pull it though, because I don't know, I have that kind of attitude where it's like, if the other person has the same thinking as me, then this would be the best outcome. So yeah, I think that's why I'd pull.
Well, actually, the way I would do this, the stag, the way I would formulate this is switch the 5 and the 1s, so that there's those 1s on the middle and 5s on the side. So if you do nothing, 5 die. If you do something, then either 1 dies or 0 dies, depending on what the other guy does. So you're banking upon whether the other individual is a deontologist or not.
But wait, but if it's done that way, then isn't it just? I think if the 5 and 1 are switched, then just everyone would pull them.
How
Oh,
would you
you're saying
switch them
deontologist?
though?
Well, no, not everyone would pull it because, for example, I would be inclined not to pull it because the risk of murdering one individual might outweigh the certainty of letting 5 people die.
Well, how would you switch the people?
No, I'm saying, like, if you change the scenario so that the 5 and the 1 are reversed.
Okay. So what's your answer given the situation currently?
Yeah, what is it you value?
Well, I mean, I think that, I mean, it's really hard because people are so variable in how they respond to these questions. I mean, I would probably do nothing. But if you switch the 5 and the 1 so that you were so that it was like either a chance of doing nothing or killing 1 or a certainty of letting 5 die, I would be maybe more inclined to pull the lever, but I probably would do it. I probably would pull the lever in that case. That might be my tipping point.
Okay, so you have a what if where you would pull the lever, and I think nobody disagrees with you.
However, if you turn this into a loop dilemma, then I probably wouldn't pull the lever, even if I would have to let 5 die, because I wouldn't want to take the risk of using one individual to save the other.
Why not?
Well, because of what I was talking with Liz earlier, which is that it's that collateral damage it's immoral, obviously, to kill someone to kill someone via collateral damage, but it's no another order of magnitude worse if you use that individual as a means to an end.
So that would mean that you shouldn't be vegan then?
Not sure how that follows.
Well, you're using animals as a means to an end.
Well, no. Carnism uses animals as a means to an end.
No. Veganism does.
All right. Well, you got me.
No, I haven't got you. I'm not playing games.
You don't think so? So explain to me, like, why would you say that veganism is less likely to use other sentient beings as a means to an end?
Is it the case that you purchase vegetation, shall we say, plants in this case, from industrially produced crops?
Right.
Okay, so then you're paying me to kill sentient beings on your behalf so that you can eat plants.
How?
Well, what do you mean? Why are you asking me how? Do you not know how it works?
What, you mean crop deaths?
I do indeed mean that.
Right, but crop deaths are collateral damage. They're not means to an end.
No, they're not collateral damage, they're deliberate damage. Collateral
Right.
damage is accidental damage, like if you bomb somebody's house and the neighbors get killed. That's not what happens with industrial crop farms.
No. The distinction between intentional.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. What did you say?
Technical difficulties, I think.
I didn't hear what he, like the tail end of the sentence.
Yeah, he cut out for me too.
I don't think that's deliberate on his part. I think he's just maybe having a messed up connection.
Right.
Damn, foiled. It actually works now.
Yeah, welcome back.
Yeah, so collateral damage is not, it can be intentional. In fact, it usually is.
Okay.
So like if I bomb someone, I know that there are going to be people that die, and I see those people on the ground, and I'm targeting the terrorists, but I know there are going to be some innocent bystanders that are killed. I see them, the little white dots on the radar, and I still, shoot the missile. Those individuals are being killed, but they are intentionally being killed. Their deaths are foreseen, but I'm not using them as a means to an end.
Well, I mean, what would be the means to an end?
So a means to an end is best thought about by imagining an alternate universe where everything is identical except those individuals don't exist.
I don't think I accept that.
Well, I'm just saying the way that I do it, and it just is that if you imagine an alternate universe where everything's identical except for those individuals not existing, and I did the same action, would I still get the same result? And if the answer is yes, then I didn't need to use those individuals for my end. They're not a means to an end, so their deaths are collateral damage.
So it's about the results.
It's about whether those results would have been achieved in an alternate universe if those individuals didn't exist.
And meanwhile, back here on Earth,
well, I mean that is sort of the point of fictive
well,
reasoning.
I mean, like we can go to Mars if you want, but I mean, meanwhile, back here on Earth where we live.
I mean, I would argue that this sort of counterfactual reasoning process is sort of what our brains have been designed to do by evolution, is to think about alternate scenarios that don't exist and imagine what if.
Great. Give me an example.
Well, like every time you do something to someone, you think about, what if I done something else? What would the outcome have been in this alternate universe where I did something else?
Okay. So under that reasoning, you don't have a justification for killing animals so that you can have crops.
So the point of contention I had with Lizzie wasn't really crop dust.
Hang on, no, come on. Look, I'm not going to allow that. I'm sorry. I love Nick. I do. I honestly like Nick a lot. But I'm not going to let you dodge like that, man. I mean, why would I? You know, you can't just go to, what about problem B? No.
What? Okay, fine. Let's stick on it then. Let's keep.
Yeah, let's stick on it. Let's hash it out, and let's see what it ends up.
Okay, so what is going on? Veggies and Twisted Out of Your League are like sending.
I don't know what's going on.
They're spamming.
I'm not really following the chat. I will start following it because we're still recording as
They're
per your
spamming
request.
the chat with these crazy hypothetical trolley dilemmas, which actually look very entertaining. I also look back at them.
Yeah, I mean, it's very interesting. That I would never deny that. But I mean, you know, here while we have to distinguish things from other things, is it okay to kill rabbits so that you can have your crops?
Wait, are we talking about poisoning rabbits now?
No, I would never do that. That would be terrible.
Are we talking about shooting rabbits to stop them from eating your crops?
We are, yes.
Okay, well, this is the thing that I was going to that you told me I couldn't go to.
No, you can go to wherever you want. You can talk about anything you want.
Well, I mean, so this was Lizzie's main point of contention because that is a direct violation of the doctrine of double effect. The collateral damage thing is not, but this is, and yet I was still arguing that this is not that. This is something that might be permissible, even if it's not strictly moral to do this sort of thing.
But you're okay with it anyway.
Right. It's like it's not the worst thing you can do.
Okay. Let me ask you a question.
It's about avoiding the worst thing you can do.
Okay. Can I ask you a question? If it's okay to murder rabbits, right? You guys like the word murder, okay? So we're going to use that. Can we holocaust the rabbits so that you guys can have crops?
I mean, I'm not a big fan of using the word Holocaust in that way, but
I am, because I like taking the piss out of Ask Yourself.
Right. Yeah, he would take offense that you would even associate me with him, but
No, okay. I'm sorry. I apologize.
No, please don't apologize. That's fine. No, it's fine. I think there's some value to using words like that. It just, I think that when they're used too much, the kind of the meaning of them is sort of kind of lost. I think the meaning of the word Holocaust is sort of lost when it's used like. So you think it's okay to Holocaust this and Holocaust that? I mean, I kind of see the same thing with using the word rape too much.
Yeah, I agree. That's pretty reasonable. No objection to that. So, can I kill rabbits and then eat them afterwards so that you guys can have the crops that you want to eat?
You mean kill them in the Holocausting sense?
I just mean kill them, as in the dictionary definition of the word kill.
Oh, okay.
Well, I mean, what else would they be? Like snuffing out life, if you want.
Okay, so my answer to this is that it would not be the worst thing you can do to shoot a rabbit who came onto your property to eat the vegetables that you're trying to raise to sell for your family. But if you were then to eat those rabbits, then that would constitute an egregious act of moral violation. Or even if you were to take pleasure from shooting them.
Okay, I take no pleasure, so we've got rid of that one. Why can't I eat them after I kill them? You kill them, and you just don't eat them.
I mean, I suppose if you were to wander by and see a bunch of dead rabbits that I had shot, I suppose you could go and take them.
No, we took shooting out of the equation.
Oh, we took shooting out also?
If you want to, why not?
Why not? Yeah. So I suppose if you were to, I think that killing animals in the process in the in the process of this most recent one is just insane. Shooting animals in the God damn it. I mean, I'm basically never gonna use a trolley dilemma again until to you guys. You realize you've pretty much
Wow.
taken trolley dilemmas off the table. I just can't use them anymore. I'm gonna have to just do
Well,
all
look,
morality, moral philosophy without. But okay, yeah. So
you
yes,
and I acknowledge that we both kill rabbits, right? We just do it for different reasons.
wait, no, I don't kill rabbits.
Yes, you do. You murdering
Oh, oh,
bastard.
oh, 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 you mean by buying crops? Yeah, yeah. Okay, right.
Yeah.
So if
And so you need
right, so
people like me to exist in order to protect the crops that you want to buy. What's the problem with me eating rabbits?
well, because that's exploitative.
And what you're doing isn't?
Right. What I'm doing is collateral damage.
Yeah, okay. Well, that just sounds like an excuse to me.
Because I'm not using the animals as a means to an end, meaning that
Neither am
my
I.
process. Well, you are because you're
No,
eating
I'm not.
them, so that's.
Yeah, sure. I mean, okay, so your argument would be that you can kill them as long as you don't eat them afterwards.
So okay, so
Not very good.
so you can right, so you can. I'm sorry. Repeat what you just said.
So your argument would be that you're allowed to kill animals to protect your crops, which I agree with. You're allowed to do that. I kill them to protect your crops too. The only difference between you and me is that I eat them afterwards.
Right. So the eating. You would not be able to eat the animals had you not killed them. Like
Well,
the animals
okay.
would have to exist for you to have their flesh for you to eat them.
Well,
Hence, you're
yes,
taking something that doesn't
they
belong to
have to
you.
exist. Obviously, that's taken as a given.
Right, but they wouldn't have to exist to raise crops.
They don't have to exist to raise crops. They exist anyway.
Right, exactly. So that's the difference between
The
eating
the
crops than
difference is I kill them on your behalf, and I eat them afterwards. That's the only difference. You kill just as many as I do.
wait, are you arguing that you're only eating them because they're dead because you killed them for me and now they're just kind of like so you're kind of like the guy
Yes.
just picking up
Well, not picking up roadkill. I didn't quite catch the last word that you said there, but I assume it was roadkill. Yeah, I kill animals so that vegan crops can exist.
I mean I think it's very dangerous territory because
Not for me.
you're getting because you're getting a benefit from them and you could make it would be hard to make
So
the
are
argument.
you.
Right, but you're getting a benefit that could potentially encourage you to actually kill them for the purpose of eating them.
No, I'm just killing them so that you can eat your crops.
Okay, well, this is an interesting, an interesting thought experiment.
No,
So-
I'm sorry. I have to chop you off there. It's not a thought experiment. It's what I do.
So you only eat animals that you kill protecting your cropland.
Not just my cropland, but cropland. Yes.
So the only animals you eat are the ones that are killed in the act of protecting your cropland.
Not my cropland, other people's cropland. Yes, and I'm on record as having said this many, many times.
And you get no pleasure from shooting them.
Nope, no pleasure. This is what I stuffed Logan Blake on. I don't know if you know who that guy is, but I screwed him many times.
Right. I'm just trying to see if that how that like.
Would you like to have commercially harvested crops, or would you not? At your disposal,
I mean,
of course.
like you know, I mean, one thing I just want to make clear is that killing as a whatchamacallit, killing as a killing even through collateral damage is still an immoral act. For example,
It's not collateral damage. I'm sorry, but I have to stop you going off topic. It's not collateral damage. It's necessary damage. It's deliberate.
no, what I'm saying is that even doing what vegans do, which would be buying buying products that were produced through crop deaths, is still an immoral action, because you're in the same way that if I was like in a crowded amusement.
So we're all immoral then.
So like if I was in a crowded amusement park, and let's say I had a heart attack, and the only way for me to get to the hospital was to mow over a bunch of people to get to the hospital as fast as possible, that would be killing a bunch of people intentionally via collateral damage, but it wouldn't be moral to do that.
That's something that I would suggest is avoidable, but it
Well, in my
doesn't
hypothetical, it's not
answer my
avoidable because
question.
you're in like a crowded park, and like it's a parade, and there's no way of getting to the hospital without running over 100.
I see. Okay. In my
But that would still
hypothetical, do you really want to do hypotheticals? You don't want to do this.
I'm just using to illustrate that collateral damage is still immoral.
Okay, well then you're immoral.
Right, sure, but like
because you engage in that, right? You support you financially support the industries that engage in that practice, so that makes you immoral by your own definition.
Right, I mean it is immoral to engage in actions that involve intentionally killing others, even if they're being used as even if their deaths are collateral damage and not exploitative death.
Okay, so which one of us is the more immoral one?
Well, I mean, it would be the individual that was actually killing animals for. So, okay, so there's another element that that I would.
Can you address the original element before bringing another one? Just please, if you could.
Okay, so all right, so what was the okay? Well, I'm sorry. So this was the
Do you want me to refresh you? I'll refresh you.
Yeah. Go for it. Yeah, refresh me. Go ahead.
Right, we are refreshing it. Now, for your crops to exist, people like me have to exist in order to kill animals so that your crops can thrive and be produced to the point of harvest. You're purchasing those crops. They necessarily, huge emphasis on that word, necessarily entail the deaths of animals. I do that. I eat those animals that I kill. What's the problem?
I mean, I think it's disrespectful.
Okay, let's say we agree it's disrespectful. What's the problem?
Well, I mean, it's immoral to disrespect someone.
Okay, well then you're just as disrespectful as I am.
Well, I mean, I think it's disrespectful to use someone's wrongfully killed body for some purpose after they've done.
Do you? Okay, why?
Right.
So the animal is dead. It's died because there's something that you want to have. What is the problem with me eating it afterwards? I mean, you're not one of these that objects to eating like roadkill or naturally dead animals, are you?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's an element of disrespect in like if you hit an animal to then eat the body of the animal.
No, we're not hitting the animal in order to eat it.
No, accidentally. Even if you act like a road-killed animal, yeah.
Oh, okay. And what would be your justification for that?
Well, I mean, I mean, I think it's a I think we can violate the dead by not being respectful to their to their remains and to their memory.
Okay, how do you get to there?
Well, I
I
mean,
mean,
I think
I agree that we can violate the dead. It just depends on your sensibilities. This is just a virtue ethicist argument.
well, no, it's not. It's still a deontological argument.
No, it isn't.
Yeah, I mean, like it's like if
Well,
if you were
if it is, I tell you what, I'll give you the big steel man, right? If it is, then stop doing it.
I'm sorry, cut off.
Did you hear anything I said? Or...
Not the last sentence.
Okay, I said I will agree with you that it's disrespectful. Let's say we agree on that. So you should stop doing it.
Wait, I'm sorry. What do you mean? I'm not using the dead for anything.
Oh yes, you are.
What am I using the dead for?
You're using the dead for crop fertilization. You are paying people like me to shoot animals in the head. No, sorry, the face. It's important to say the face. I understand that. You're funding my industry.
Wait. Why is it important to say the face?
Oh, I just like taking the piss out of myself. I'm not taking the piss out of you.
No, I thought you were doing that. I just thought that I found that intriguing that you made that point.
Yeah, I mean, it's also important to say THO after every sentence, but, we can let that slide.
Mm-hmm. Right. Shooting in the face, though?
Yeah, shooting in the face, though. Which is what you want me to do. Because if you don't want me to do it, okay, I'll stop. But then you'll have to bite the bullet on the consequences of me not doing it.
I mean, I think that we should definitely strive for industries that don't,
Sure,
that minimize.
yes. On Mars. Great. Meanwhile, here in the real world, your veganic crops that you enjoy so much, and I have no problem with you enjoying them. Do you have any idea how many animals are killed for the production of such? Have you ever been on a farm?
Yeah, I spent a lot of time on a farm my fourth year of vet school.
Okay, what kind of farm was it?
It was. I mean, we went to some Amish farms in the countryside, but most of the time was spent on like the large farm that was run by the school itself, by the university.
Okay, and this is going back a little bit, so practices were slightly different. So when you go to your local supermarket, presumably tomorrow, it may not be actually tomorrow, next time you go, you're not going to be worrying about the amount of animals that died, so you can buy your own vegetables, right?
I mean, it is something that I think about.
Yeah, you think about it, you just don't care.
I mean, I think that, the most we can expect out of ourselves, that we treat animals the way we would want to be treated if we were in the same circumstance as those animals. And I think that
Oh, really? That's dangerous. Do you want to think about it again?
well, no, and I think that that the standards that I'm applying for allowing these deaths from agriculture are the same as I would apply if it was humans in the same situation or myself in the same situation.
Okay, well, there you are. That answers name the trait then, doesn't it?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that's. I mean, it's not.
Actually,
Yeah.
I should ask, I mean, do you support the name the trait argument? Because I was assuming that you did, and I might be mistaken in that. So, do you or don't you?
I think it can be useful in some circumstances.
Yeah, I think it's crap in all circumstances.
Really, in all circumstances, it's crap.
Yep, sure.
I mean, look, my
do
my
you want to
main
go through it?
use-
I'll go through it with you if you want.
No, it's all right. We don't. I mean, I'm just trying to think, like the. So okay, so your position is that that if I'm going to make the argument that that it's morally permissible to allow animals to die via crop deaths, provided they were not being killed for the purpose of those crops, then the question is, can then somebody, even the killer, use those the remains from from those killings and eat them?
That was one of my questions.
And you're claiming that that is in fact, in reality, what you do, so that you never
I am claiming that, yes.
so you never purchase any animal products that were procured through, like you don't buy milk, for example,
That's correct.
and you don't ever like go to a restaurant and buy meat.
That's correct also.
So you only buy animals that were killed, and you don't take any pleasure from killing them.
You need to take out the word buy, because I don't buy.
Okay, and so you only eat animals that you killed in defending crops.
That is correct, yes.
And your point of contention is that whether or not it's immoral or not immoral, it's no more immoral than eating the crops that the animals were killed to protect.
You mean eating the animals that the crops were protected from? Yes.
Eating the animals that the crops were protected from is no worse than eating the crops that the animals were killed and protecting to protect those crops.
Yes, that would be my argument.
And you're saying that you yourself consistently apply that in your own life to such a degree that you never purchase any products that were procured through through exploitative actions, such as milk or meat or anything.
Yes, correct.
It's an interesting position. I'm trying to see how that would. I mean, my only objection at this point is this one of the this issue of the disrespect of using the body of a wrongfully killed animal rather than treating it with homage and respect and burying it or something.
Well, I mean, that's something that you would have to persuade me of, because, like, I mean, are you talking about, like, spirits and souls and things like that? Because I'd need an argument for that, right? I'd need to have an actual position on that. That's I mean, we could just take that out of the equation for the sake of conversation.
Well, like, so in Texas, for example, I live in Texas. If if someone is caught, robbing your property, and they're running away, and you shoot them in the back while they're running away with your property, let's say they jump into a car and they're driving off, and you have a sniper rifle and you take them out before they leave your property, but they're posing no threat to you. And this is your way of protecting your property, so you can retrieve it again. And if you can substantiate that you did this to retrieve your property, there's no other way of doing it. Like, Texas law
Yeah,
allows you to do that.
I'm fairly familiar with that, and I'm okay with people doing that.
Right, and so this would probably be the closest analog to something that's legal to do humans, that's similar to killing an animal who's raiding your crop. But for someone then to use the remains of that person that was shot in a for some sort of, for either through like a medical experiment, or use their body as a cadaver for like medical students to train on without their say so, or them, that person having volunteered to donate their body in that way, that would be a disrespectful act. You disagree with that now? That would be a disrespectful act to do to that individual who was killed, and you can make the argument that an animal that's killed is actually being violated more than this individual, because an animal is not a moral agent who did not knowingly, do something they thought they were going to be killed for. They were just like living their lives. So it would actually be
Okay.
even worse to do it to an animal than to do it to this person. And yet we all intuitively know it would be wrong to do it to this person. So you wanting to eat this animal seems to me to be kind of adding insult to injury. It was already an insult to kill them, but you're adding or an injury to kill them, but you're adding insult to it by now consuming their flesh.
Okay. Well, that actually harms your argument, not mine, because...
Really?
Yes, definitely. The animals that got killed so that you could have your crops, did they consent to being killed?
No, I mean, no, of course they didn't consent to being killed.
Okay, did they consent to being eaten after they were killed?
I mean, no. I mean, you have
Obviously no, right?
You proxy consent. They wouldn't have consented, right?
Okay, and yet you do it anyway.
Like, do what anyway? Kill them anyway?
Well, you pay for them to be killed. I mean, obviously you're not doing this yourself, but you pay for them to be killed, right?
Right, but my as I mentioned early on in this debate, the issue was not doing what the other individual wants or what you would want to have done on. It's about not exploiting another individual as you would not want to be exploited yourself. It's a particular type of
Okay, well, you should probably stop doing that then.
I mean, I would want others to not exploit me. I would not demand of others to like give me charity, and I would and even though I would not want them to kill me via collateral damage, the thing that I would want least of all, the thing that I would find most violatory towards me, would be to use me as a means to an end. And I mean, I think that disrespecting someone by using
tell
them
that
after they've
tell
been killed.
that to the pigeons, the rabbits, the deer. Tell that to them.
Well, they're not being used as a means to an end.
Yes, they are. Well, under your definition of means to an end, they are.
I mean, I think your argument is quite strong. So I mean, I wasn't really expecting you to just kind of throw this out at the end here, and I really like.
That's fair.
It's certainly something that I'm going to give some more thought on how to best respond to it, because you sort of because you've conceded a lot of or you've allowed for a lot of things. Yeah, I mean it's good. I have to definitely.
Hey man, look, I'm all about honest conversation. I don't think you will find it. Well, okay, this server might be. You could call it a biased sample. I don't think it's a biased sample, but most people here know exactly what my argument is and will concede on it whether they're vegan or not vegan. So thank you for that.
Oh yeah, thanks. So no, it's definitely very. I mean, it's very interesting. I just I don't know. I mean, there intuitively there's something that seems wrong to me about, because I never said that it was morally okay to kill someone via collateral damage. I merely said it wasn't as bad, and that we have to hold ourselves to a minimum standard as
See,
vegans.
I disagree with that as well.
But
I mean,
but like,
imagine like a war or something. Who complains about the person who deliberately got bombed? Nobody gives a shit about that. They complain about the innocent casualties, right? Look at Osama bin Laden.
yeah, I mean, people don't like collateral damage. That's kind of the point.
There you go.
Right, so collateral damage is still an immoral act. It's just not as bad as intentionally murdering somebody.
No, I would say it's worse.
Well,
If somebody wants to
intentionally.
blow up my neighbor, right? Let's say there's a house attached to mine, like a semi-detached house, and somebody wants to blow up my neighbor, and they blow up me in the process. Everybody's going to be complaining about the collateral damage because it's the innocent victims, isn't it?
I mean, I think that all else being equal, intentionally killing someone is worse than accidentally
All
killing
else
someone,
is not
or
equal.
on it or collaterally damage. So wait, in this example, you're saying that your neighbor is targeted, and people aren't gonna find that to be even more egregious than someone who's walking by who gets killed in the crossfire.
That's exactly my point. I'm the neighbor of the person who was supposed to get bombed.
Right, but presumably there's a
Everybody's going to
reason
be
why
talking about me. They're going to be like, oh, this innocent guy next door got bombed and fucking blown up, when all we meant to do was kill that one person.
Right, but presumably the person that's being bombed was being bombed because there's some sort of criminal or something.
Sure, maybe.
Right, so what I'm saying is that intentionally killing someone who's innocent is worse than killing someone who's innocent through via collateral damage.
Well, where does that happen? Who kills anybody who's innocent? We were talking about terrorists.
Well, it happens with animals all the time.
Exactly, which is why you should stop supporting it.
No, intentionally killing animals happens all the time, and they are innocent.
No, you are intentionally killing animals.
Right, but intentionally exploitatively killing animals happens all the time.
No, nobody's exploitative. Well, I'm not. I shouldn't say nobody because that would be inaccurate, but I'm not doing that.
The vast majority of animals that are killed via as an exploitative act of using them as a means to an end. I'm not saying that's what you're doing by defending your crops. What I'm saying is what you're doing perhaps might be more falling into the category of killing innocent beings through through collateral damage. But that's still that doesn't make that morally good, and that's the reason why crop deaths are still immoral. So the least we could do for
Okay.
someone that's killed in that way is to respect their remains after they've died, and part of respecting their
No.
remains is not
No.
taking pleasure in eating their meat.
Right. Is the argument that these animals that we're killing are sentient? Because if it is, then once they're killed, all sentience is gone. Or would you, would you oppose that?
Right, the sentience is gone, but you can still disrespect them because you can.
No, I don't agree with that.
In the same way that you can be disrespectful to the person that you shoot in the back when they're running away from your property, and have been killed intentionally to protect your resources, to protect your property. Like you can't just then rape their body or something like
Why not?
because you have to treat that body with respect.
Why?
In respect.
Says who? Says you?
I mean, I think that's just a pretty strong intuition, a moral intuition.
Well,
that
you can
that
have a moral intuition, and that's fine. I might even agree with it, but that's not an argument.
I mean, I would argue that is a one of those unconditioned stimuli intuition.
So it's a virtue ethicist stance then.
I don't know why you would call that a virtue ethicist stance.
Because that's what it is. A dead body can't experience anything unless you take some other position in which you would think that it can. I don't know why you would think that, but a dead body can't experience any suffering or pleasure, right?
I mean, I'm willing to say it's a deontological position.
Well, yeah, it's a. Well, what is your deontological position on it then?
That it's immoral to exploit someone or
Describe
to,
immoral. What does immoral mean?
Oh, we're going there. That's
Well,
a meta ethics question.
you're gonna have to because you invoked it.
Wow, we just doubled the length of this podcast
Maybe.
or this debate.
Look, you're saying it's immoral to do anything to a dead body, right? And you've already agreed that it doesn't have sentience or consciousness or anything even resembling either of those two things. Where's the problem with doing anything to it? Where's the problem with chopping a bit of flesh off it?
I mean I do admit that that our moral intuitions to the dead are somewhat strange, and they're hard to really pinpoint because
it's virtue ethicism. That's what it is. And
well,
I
I mean,
agree with you. I agree that we shouldn't disrespect the dead. Well, when it comes to humans, at least.
I mean, I just don't know why you're calling it virtue ethics. I mean,
Because that's what it is. Look it up.
Virtue ethics are generally
virtue
focused on virtues, and I'm not saying that it's virtuous to respect the dead. I'm saying it's immoral to respect the dead.
With respect to what? It's going to be a virtue ethicist position by default. It can't be anything else unless you want to invoke something like a god or souls or spirits or something like that.
Wait, if I promise you that I'm going to do something for you, let's say you pay me some money, and then I promise I'm going to do something, in payment for what you did, and then I don't do it, that's a violation of you, correct? That would be an immoral action. That wouldn't be a virtue. That wouldn't be
that doesn't
related to virtue
violate
ethics,
me,
right?
no.
So my failure to pay back on a contract is a violation of a deontological principle. It's not a virtue ethics position.
Am I alive?
Well, I mean, let's say I don't know. Does that change the fact? Does that change my obligations to fulfill the contract?
Yes, if I'm dead, you no longer have an obligation to me.
Yes, yeah, I don't agree with that. I think that if you're
what are you gonna do? Pay back a dead body? What are you gonna do? Shove it in my coffin?
No, I mean it's like if you ask me to do something for you, then and you pay me to do it, then I have an obligation to you to do it, whether or not you're alive or dead after that.
No, I disagree. You don't have an obligation to me once I'm dead because me is no longer here.
Yeah, I don't think we can attach you to some singular point in time. I think you are.
I wasn't talking about a point in time. I was talking about me being me. SD, the guy that you chat to online and disagree with all the time. Once I'm gone, what are you going to do? How are you going to pay me back?
I mean, we can sometimes the whole idea of a will is the reason why we should uphold wills are so that we don't disrespect the dead. And I mean, fulfilling a will,
Look,
someone's dying.
Disrespecting the dead exists for the living. Okay, that's why people generally don't shout obscenities at people's funerals. Okay, we don't do it for the dead person. We do it for the living.
Wait, so you're saying the only reason to go to a funeral is for the living people, not for the dead one?
Yes, absolutely. That's exactly what I'm saying.
Yeah, no, I don't think that's true. I don't think that the reason why we go to funerals is for the living people.
Okay, you go for the dead person?
Of course, you go to respect. You pay respects to the dead.
You pay respect to the dead for the sake of yourself, I would say. I forgot to include that, so for yourself and for the living. Well, you think the guy... I mean, I've carried enough dead bodies, dude. You think you go for the people that are in the coffin or are getting chucked into the incinerator? You think they know you're there?
Did you ever see the movie Saving Private Ryan?
I don't know how that answers my question. Sure.
Well,
I've
it's
seen
another.
it. Sure.
Remember Tom Hanks' final words to Ryan?
That's great. That's a movie.
Right, but the sentiment is there when he said "earn this," because they sacrificed themselves for him. And then even 40 years later, when he was recalling the event, like he said, I've tried to be a good person. I've tried to pay back this, the sacrifices people made. That was all he felt obligated to do that on behalf of the dead people.
Right.
Not for himself.
That's a movie, right, which is a big problem in itself. You saw something in a movie, I'm not going to accept that as some kind of statement of fact. But two, I've got several dead family members, and I've been to their gravestones, right, where they've been buried, and I've spoken to those gravestones. I've spoken out loud, shall we say, right, to dead family members. It doesn't mean they can hear me.
Well, no, it's not about whether they can hear you or not. It's about the fact that they still exist. Maybe they exist in your mind, but they still as separate from yourself, and you have an obligation to their memory.
Like, you don't have an obligation to their memory, and I accept that I have memories, sure. I mean, who would ever deny that? But, like, this doesn't get you anywhere near where you wanted to go.
I mean, I know. I think that your intuition is going again. I mean, I don't want to appeal to popularity, but I think it probably is the, it's certainly not the minority view in the Discord. I mean, look.
So hang on, what isn't the minority view in what Discord?
All right, look. It looks like we have a Jew in here. I'm Jewish as well, so let me ask this Jewish person.
That's fine. I don't mind that you're Jewish. Which channel are you looking at? Because I'm recording in VC text, right?
Well, I mean, he has a lot of, he has a lot of Hebrew in his line, so I assume that he probably, I don't want to be like an identity identity politics or anything, but I assume that he might be more sensitized to like, the Holocaust. So like, don't you? So I
who
wonder.
Are you talking about though?
Spaghetti.
He's talking about spaghetti.
Oh, that guy, right? Okay. Well, I mean, he's been in the server for a long time, so
right. And I assume that he would. I would think that perhaps he'd be, being sensitized to the Holocaust, perhaps more so than the average person. He might recognize that the reason for paying, for remembering the victims of the Holocaust is to honor them. It's out of
yes, and who does, like, why would anybody do that? It's for the living, right? Who else is going to be for?
I have a question.
Yeah, you can go right ahead. I'm just going to take a piss. I'm sorry if that's a bit rude, but I'll be back in just a few moments. You guys carry on, by all means.
Yeah, Nick, I have a question. I really can't wrap my head around this whole disrespect thing. I just really can't. And I'm just going to start this off by saying that I'm a Christian, so I do have religious beliefs, but I actually more so agree with SD about why we honor the dead, or why we crap, my kids started crying, or why we honor the dead, or why we do certain things for dead. But beyond that, my real question is, last year we processed a deer, and this wasn't a deer that we shot. It was a deer that was hit by the truck. One second. It was a deer that was hit by a truck in front of us, and this deer went flying over the other side of the median and kind of landed on the side of the road. And we immediately stopped and went to go check on it. And when we did, we realized that both of its back legs were completely shattered and broken. And so that meant that it wouldn't matter how much rehabilitation time or how good of a veterinarian you found it, this deer would never walk again, and it would it would essentially die. This buck would die. So I went home and I got the 22 and we shot it in the head and killed it. It was an instant death. And then we took his body home, and I still have its hide, and I tanned the hide, and we ate the meat. And I mean, that meat lasted us for about 5 months, where we didn't even have to buy beef, really. And that fed our family for half a year. I'm really trying to understand how you rationalize this as disrespecting an animal. It doesn't make any sense to me.
I mean, that may be the exception that proves the rule.
How exactly is it an exception? Because you did say that it is. I think you're just saying it's an exception because of your emotions, and a lot of what you said has been emotive. Like, you say that you intrinsically feel a certain way about respectability. I mean, intrinsics are just feeling. And they don't even have to be backed up by facts or logic. It's just how you feel. So how is it any different when you said that you don't even support roadkill? We killed this deer. I mean, we shot it in the head. It's not even. It wasn't even roadkill. We had to shoot it in the head.
No,
Or else,
I know, I understand that. No, that would still constitute roadkill.
okay, all right, fine. It's roadkill. So how is this any different?
And I mean, and like, and we're assuming that there was. I mean, it sounds from what you're describing that there was no way of reviving this deer. Right?
No, absolutely no way. Both its legs, and I still have pictures of it. Both its legs were completely shattered. I mean, they
Right.
were almost severed.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, it would be, I suppose if that were the only meat that you ate, then I would find that morally acceptable. But given the fact that it's in the context of you being willing to kill animals intentionally to use their flesh, then that kind of adds sort of I think, sort of a sinister tone to the idea of eating this animal. It's like you're sort of you're being more of an opportunistic eater. So for example, like, I think that if, like, say, a vegan did what you're describing, then I think that could be seen as sort of a respectful way to deal with this, to treat this animal. But I think that, or maybe if you fed the animal to, let's say, a carnivore, that might be a respectful way to treat the animal. But the problem is that, you're actually in support of actually intentionally killing animals for their meat. So when you eat an animal's flesh, I mean, meat means something different to you than it would mean to someone who doesn't do that. So
How would it be?
intent really makes a big difference, I think, in terms of whether an action is respectful or not.
Well, my intent is to eat an animal that is going to, that if I didn't eat it, it would just be rotting along the side of the road for everyone to see. Which, personally, if you were dead, I mean, and I'm just saying this as an example because I've been listening to this whole thing. Kind of throughout this, you basically implied that there's no moral or ethical difference between the human and the animal. Am I right?
Not categorically based upon species. There certainly are differences in terms of cognitive characteristics that
No,
have
that's not
moral.
what I mean, is there a moral and ethical difference in, I guess, value or whatever between an animal and a human?
I'm not really good at. I don't really like answering questions about human versus animal like that, because I divide my moral categories based upon characteristics of sentience and not characteristics of species.
That
I
sounds
mean,
like
that,
a
I mean
with
that's kind
extra.
of like asking. It's a bit of it's sort of a loaded question. It's kind of like, do you think there's you know because you can categorize uh, entities in many different ways, but the human versus non-human distinction is not a more relevant way to categorize sentient entity.
Okay, I mean, that really just sounds like speciesism with extra steps to me. But I mean, if I what was I talking about before? Oh yeah. So I mean, I'm an omnivore. I'm going to eat. When I see food, which would have been that deer, I would. Oh yeah, I remember what I would say. What I was saying. If your body, since we're talking about respectability, if your body was on the side of the road, you probably wouldn't want people to just see you laying on the side of the road, right? Naked or whatever, dead, right? You wouldn't want that. And so it really wouldn't be any different between me deciding to take this deer off of the side of the road that's going to end up rotting, because it takes whoever decides to pick up the roadkill around here, it takes them quite a while to the point where the animals are actually rotting, and then they decide to pick them up when they become an eyesore. So it's not really opportunistic, more so doing everyone a favor. And you know what? Let's change that. Even if it is opportunistic, my actions will really be no different between that of another animal who's looking to survive, especially even if they're omnivore, like raccoons, for example. If
Well, yeah.
opportunism is what decides morality, moral or immoral, then I mean we would be able to say that raccoons are immoral for being opportunistic.
I mean, we can't, hold animals morally accountable the way we can adult humans, right?
If you I mean, if you operate on that belief system, I'm willing to go up on that belief system. The issue is I say things like this because oftentimes vegans don't hold any actual moral difference between humans and animals. If you hold a moral difference between humans and animals, then yeah, we can argue based on those differences. Yeah.
Well, I understand. You do know the distinction between moral patiency and moral agency, right?
Sorry, say that again.
Agency versus patiency.
I've
So
heard
it's just that
buff, so
so there are so there's certain attributes that entitle a being to being morally valued, and then there are other attributes that entitle a being to not only be morally valued but also be held morally accountable for the way they treat other moral other beings. And I would say that neurotypical adult humans would fall into the category of moral patients. I mean, moral agents as well as moral patients. So the characteristics that are sufficient for moral patiency are the ability to experience, sentient states that have intrinsic value. So, for example, the ability to feel love. But the states that are required for moral agency involve the ability to recognize the moral patiency of other individuals, and certainly like a raccoon doesn't have that capacity, so they're in the category of moral patients but not moral agents.
okay. So essentially, I understand what you mean, and I'm just going to make this like more simplistic terms. Essentially, it would be a question of would you put this individual on the stand to try, right?
Would you put well, sure. I mean, generally we have laws. I mean, generally our legal system holds people accountable only if they're moral agents.
Yes, and that's what I mean. I'm just putting it in more simplistic terms, so I have better time understanding it. So yeah,
but obviously our legal system doesn't. It's still evolving, and it tends to lag moral progress by about 50 years. So currently, our legal system does not hold people morally accountable for the way they treat animals, but the people they put, that they hold morally accountable are moral agents. It's just that I wouldn't say that certainly what's legal doesn't make it ethical.
well, wait, okay, sorry. Did you say that our system does not hold people accountable for the way they treat animals?
Not the way they should. Like they hold people accountable for some things, but not other things.
I assume the way they should means if you kill and eat an animal, you should be punished.
Sure, yeah.
Okay. Well, we're gonna have to strongly disagree on that, but yeah, going back to respectability, right? We went way off topic. That's my fault. But going back to respectability, again, I don't see how Mode is saying, "Oh, I want to eat, and I know this deer is going to feed my family." I would actually see that, and again, you're basing all of this off of your emotion. If I were to say, "Well, I intrinsically feel that if I eat this deer, my family will be fed. This is great for us," and that's an intrinsic feeling that I have, my feelings would be just as valid as yours, and would be of no more valid than mine would. If your feelings are intrinsic.
So this is the reason why I made a distinction between unconditioned intuitions and conditioned intuitions.
You should repeat that for me, because I may have not heard that one.
So an unconditioned intuition is an intuition that is you could say it's biological as opposed to
Okay.
and it's going to be more it's something that you're essentially born with. So it's fundamental to like your neural architecture. And then you have, so for example, if you shock someone, that the pain that they get from being shocked, the unpleasantness of it, the intuition they would have that's something they don't like, that's something that's unpleasant. Like that's an unconditioned intuition.
Okay.
Then you can also tie that shock with a light. So every time you flash the light, then you're going to shock them in 2 seconds. Eventually you're going to have people or animals even react to the light in the same way they would react to the shock. But that would be a conditioned stimulus. So the only reason why they find the light unpleasant is because it's attached to this unconditioned response. And I would argue that that our response to like the one you described, the intuition that is okay to kill animals and feed your family and all that sort of thing, that would be a conditioned intuition.
And it's conditioned intuition to you because that's your opinion. Now, what if I told you that it's not conditioned? I was not raised on a farm. I wasn't even raised in the South. So I wasn't raised on a farm. I wasn't raised to raise and kill my own animals. In fact, I was raised mostly vegetarian. This isn't something that I was conditioned into. This is something that I know in my heart, that I feel pride when I put an animal in the freezer after I process it, or that we took this deer home and processed it. I mean, what you defined as unconditioned and conditioned seems entirely based off your opinion, which isn't fact. And I mean, we can probably, I'm going to bet we can probably find some science in which things like this is ingrained into your biology. I'm not saying that there is, because I don't know, but I'm saying that considering all the things that we've researched over the years, we can probably find something about this. I mean, in fact, so let's take here's actually a really good example of this. hunting is actually in our biology. We are a species over millions of years of evolution that have these behaviors such as hunting and predatory behavior within our DNA. That's unconditional, according to you. That's unconditional. So if it was proven to be unconditional, that people gravitate towards, or people feel a good bit of adrenaline and feel good and proud when they get game. I mean, it's the same way as we feel when we do completionism, such as in a video game, and we beat a video game level. We feel that surge of adrenaline. We feel the dopamine going into our brain. If we feel that same way, and that's all instinctual. That's not something that we're conditioned into. It's instinctual. If we feel that same way when we're hunting game and we get game, then that's an unconditional feeling, intrinsic feeling that we have. And it to me, it seems to kind of defeat your argument of whether this behavior is conditional or unconditional, because we do know that humans are a predatory species.
Yeah, I apologize for now introducing another concept after the ones, because you've obviously been making a lot of effort to follow along with all these concepts that have been introduced. But the next concept that I feel like is really important introduces the distinction between a moral intuition and an amoral intuition.
Okay, what do you? I think I know what these mean. So a moral intuition and amoral
Intuition, yeah.
intuition. A moral intuition. Sorry, I got tongue tied. A moral intuition and an immoral intuition, again, seems to be based upon
amoral intuition.
Amoral seems to be based upon your personal opinion of those two different concepts. I mean, this is something, again, you're saying it based off your personal feelings on the issue and then applying it as an actual irrefutable fact. Are you willing to concede that these things are based off of your personal feelings and how you feel when confronted with these subjects?
I mean, at this point, I'm just introducing variables. I'm not really making any sort of stipulations about what the moral intuitions are, or indeed what the amoral intuitions are. I'm just simply introducing them as concepts. So I've introduced the difference between a conditioned and unconditioned intuition, and then I've also introduced the difference between an amoral intuition and a moral intuition. Now,
Okay.
what those actually will constitute, or what situations those would necessarily apply to, I'm leaving open. No, they're not really based. They're not based upon my own personal biases.
Okay. All right. Cool. So I'm sorry. I made assumptions about that. I apologize.
No. You don't apologize for anything. I mean, no, I definitely don't apologize for anything. I know. And I apologize for being a bit obtuse, and thank you for allowing me to introduce additional complexity. Additional complexity into the because you've been very actually what's the word for it, accommodating to all this terminology that I've been introducing.
I know. Talk too
So
much.
well, so like, look, so basically, so we have conditioned and unconditioned intuitions, and those intuitions can be divided into moral ones and amoral ones. So we now have 4 different types of intuitions, that are divided along these 2 different dimensions, whether they're based upon morality or not, or whether they pertain to morality or not, and whether they are learned or intrinsic. So I would argue that the sort of the universal acid intuition, the intuition that overpowers all the other intuitions, is the unconditioned moral intuition.
Okay. Right.
So what I believe, and of course this is something that you don't necessarily have to accept out of hand, and it can only really be explored in thought experiment. But what I believe is that the unconditioned moral intuition is that exploiting an individual who's capable of experiencing a state of being that we intrinsically value in our own lives is immoral. That's the unconditioned moral intuition.
Okay.
So, like, basically, anyone who's capable of experiencing being exploited can be exploited. And avoiding that is such a fundamental drive that it even overcomes our very desire to even survive. Like, we would rather die than to commit a violation of that intuition.
Okay. And so, what exactly is your evidence for that?
I really want to jump in. I'm just trying to.
Oh, just a second. Just one second.
No,
Yeah.
you go ahead.
I mean, you've already kind of won the other argument, SD. Like, what do you want? Are you getting greedy?
No, not at all. It's just, I have major fucking objections to this, but I'll save them for another time. It's all right. You guys go ahead.
No, I'm kidding, SD. No, I love talking to you, but like, yeah. So like, the only evidence I can give for this is really just through thought experiments. It's not something. It's not something that I can like point you to a book and like say, okay, this is the proof.
Oh, okay.
But I think that this desire not to commit egregious acts of harm, of exploitation to others, which is founded upon our sense of justice, is something that's very fundamental to the way conscious minds are wired. I mean, I hesitate to even say wired because I think it's actually fundamental to the essence of the conscious experience itself. It's this compromise that consciousness it's like, consciousness has this intractable problem in the fact that everyone who's conscious is essentially just like everyone else. So there's sort of the sense that there is really no difference between me and you. Like, we're all the same. We're all just one blob of consciousness. But at the same time, we have to, in order to survive, we have to look out for ourselves and those we're connected to. So the solution that consciousness has is to make it. It's to allow you to do whatever to serve your own body's interests, provided it doesn't violate someone else's ability to serve their body's interests. And that's where the sense of justice comes from. And anytime we violate that, we pay a cost. There was to bring up rabbits from SD, there's a line from William Blake's poem that every outcry from the hunted hare of fiber from the brain does tear. That's from Auguries of Innocence. That's the same poem that when a robin redbreast in a cage throws all heaven in a rage. That was like, but like the idea that our brain will literally tear itself into knots if we force ourselves or we allow ourselves to take from someone else that rightfully belongs to them.
Well, I mean, I'm not sure how much I agree. I'm really not sure how much I agree with this because I see how society functions now. I'm not sure how much I agree with the idea that we tear ourselves. Maybe those who are more lawful do things such as that, tear themselves up over the idea of exploiting others. I mean, you take for example a lot of I'll just use vegans for example for this, but and I'm sorry for all the noise. I'm feeding. It's so funny. You're talking about rabbits. I'm actually feeding my rabbits right now. So
they crow like chickens though.
Yeah, I have the chickens here, and the chickens don't get feed. The rabbits get feed, and the rabbits pour the feed out onto the ground when they're rooting, and the chickens eat whatever falls on the ground. So,
I was imagining some hybrid between a chicken and a rabbit in my mind. You kind of ruined that image.
You could just call it a ricken.
A ricken,
right?
yeah.
If I could get a hybrid between a chicken and a rabbit, I'd be set. Oh man, that would be great. But
could you call it no, never mind.
Oh, a chabbit.
I can do that. A chabbit. Yeah, that's good. That's better. Yeah, I like that.
Chabbit. But yeah, like I don't know. I see how society functions now. I mean, I see that we do live on a system that is able to exploit others through corporatism. And it doesn't seem like people within corporate positions are tearing themselves apart over exploitation. It doesn't seem like it doesn't seem like vegans themselves. I mean, this is big. Like one of the vegans in Ask Yourself server, Mary, she goes on about vegans pretty much being okay with the status quo of how plants like avocado and almonds are extracted and or like bees being used for almonds and that hurting the population of the bee, or how migrants have to get your bananas and your avocados or your celery, things like that. And when confronted with these issues, vegans pretty much, just a lot of vegans, I'm not saying you or the people in this server, but a lot of vegans just kind of brush it off as something that exists and will continue to exist, and there's nothing really that they can do about it or whatever. I don't see a bunch of people tearing themselves up over that, even when confronted with that evidence. Here's another thing. This would apply to how vegans feel about animal agriculture and animal exploitation. When I'm out here, I don't feel any sort of intrinsic tearing myself apart over this idea that I'm exploiting my animals. And I don't, and most meat eaters, even if they were confronted with that evidence, they don't feel that sort of intrinsic tearing themselves apart over eating an animal or hunting or whatever. I think that, I think rather than unconditioned behavior, I think that a lot of people are conditioned into believing that animals don't die for their food, or that hunting is immoral and unnatural. I think that's rather the conditioned behavior, rather than the conditioned behavior that you would see, that you believe that meat eaters meat eaters have over eating animals or whatnot. So I mean, we actually have a vice versa thing going on with unconditional and conditioned behavior. I just don't really see it. Only times really that I see the idea of people reacting to exploitive behavior or grievous acts of injustice against other people in particular are complete wars, like the Revolutionary War or the slave revolt in Haiti, or that happened hundreds of years ago, or right now what's going on in Hong Kong, or what's going on in Iran, with protests in Iran. So those really, and those things are specific to the specific group of humans. I'm really just not seeing this idea of intrinsic anti-exploitation, when I mean we live in a world that is generally kind of that generally survives off of exploitation of others. Um, and I'm not really seeing how the relationship, and I don't see the relationship that I have with my animals personally is a type of exploitation. And to me that's the unconditional and whatever you called it. I can't remember what you called it. Does that make sense? I'm walking around here and losing my breath because I'm looking everywhere for stuff, but I hope I made sense.
Yeah, no, yeah, definitely makes sense. I think so. I guess what I would say is that, first of all, I think that when people are confronted with where meat comes from, they generally respond in quite a negative way. I think if anyone were to take a pig and set the pig on fire in the middle of a town square, people would be up in arms at the violation of that pig. So I think people do have the ability to feel, I think that the moral unconditioned stimulus is triggered through seeing animals, even farm animals, violated. And the other thing I would say, just for your other point, is that when you're looking for an unconditioned stimulus, I think because it doesn't involve learning, it can't really involve identity. So you're saying that it's an unconditioned stimulus, that it's okay to, let's say, favor, to kill animals for food, but the unconditioned stimulus wouldn't have a concept like an animal or a human. It's just a response to seeing, suffering that was caused through an intentional act, irrespective of who's doing the suffering. Like it doesn't to attach it to certain physical features, like certain attributes of the sufferer, like whether they happen to be in one species or a different species, or indeed in the past people would tend to have, they could say, okay, I have an unconditioned stimulus that I don't care when someone who's not of my race gets harmed. But that's all conditioned. That's all about you're learning who you are versus somebody else. That's not an unconditioned stimulus anymore.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure. I think that it's intrinsic, in which humans have preferences of the feelings and consideration of other humans before anything else. So you used you used a good example, right? You used the example of a pig being set on fire. Well, here's my example. I post videos on YouTube, and one of the videos that I posted recently was that of showing everyone how I butcher rabbits. And so I showed everything from how I kill the rabbit to how I process the rabbit out. And if I were to show a video of me setting this rabbit on fire while it's alive, I don't think that my viewers, who most of them are pro farmers or pro animal agriculture, or whatever you call it, pro homesteading, I don't think that they would have a very good reaction to it. But rather, I did something that was quick, generally painless, and happened so quick that the animal is dead in like 1 to 5 seconds. So I don't think that the unconditioned stimulus is the act of killing per se. I think that this intrinsic feeling that you're talking about is anti-suffering rather than killing.
Yeah, I think you're actually definitely onto something there. But I think that what people tend to do when it comes to animals is they tend to disregard their capacity to experience the states of the positive states of consciousness that give our lives meaning. So for example, earlier on, SD was talking about how cows, when their infants are taken away, how they tend to forget about it after 30 minutes or so. Isn't that what you were saying, SD?
Yeah, I
It's
actually have
about
some complaints about what was
it's about 2 minutes. Having been there and done it, I can say that I mean, you can blow it off as anecdotal if you want, but having been there and done it, yeah, it's about 2 minutes.
So if we're going to look at if indeed, whether it be true or not, if we were to see animals as beings that were not capable of a state of love, that clearly you can't love your kids if you forget about them after 2. So if that's all you're capable of, then taking your life is not that much of a violation, because you can't really experience much value out of your life. And I think that's generally the way people look at animals in general, which makes them feel okay with painlessly killing an animal, because you're not taking away much of anything in the future. The reason why I find it, such an existential nightmare to consider taking an animal's life, is because I feel like there's good evidence that animals are able to experience states of well-being that are extremely extremely powerful and meaningful. They're the sort of things that give my life worth meaning when I experience them. And so I think that if I were to try to convince somebody to activate this unconditioned moral stimulus, yeah, you're right, I would have to get them to agree with me that animals are capable of those sorts of states of being. And if I couldn't, then they wouldn't. Then there's no reason why they would respond any differently to your viewers when they see a rabbit painlessly killed.
I think that my viewers have probably seen rabbits hopping up and down because of someone, I don't know, entered the room, and they've seen farm rabbits. There is a striking difference between farm animals and house pets. My rabbits are really not interested in human interaction, and I don't know what exactly it is, but they're just not interested. Now I've had rabbits who buck that status quo, and I tend to sell them off because of their good personalities. But aside from that, I mean, I don't attribute personal feelings to I don't attribute personal feelings to what constitutes status and meaning. I mean, like I said before, I'm religious, so I have a totally different idea of what constitutes meaning, or what constitutes a value and meaning and things like that. But kind of forgot what I was going to say. My rooster spurred me, and it made me forget everything that I was going to say.
That sometimes happens. It's okay.
Yeah, I mean, roosters tend to do that sort of thing.
Yeah, they're dicks, but
I mean, look, like most of my experience with animals is with primates. I don't know if you guys would be okay with, farming and eating primates, as like, or if you would think that was just kind of par for the course.
See any benefit in farming primates, but I mean, most of the reason why we farm the animals that we do, see, like, and this is kind of a pet peeve of mine when vegans bring up things like, would you farm a dog or would you farm a cat? And it's like, no, because I mean, it's not just I'm not opposed to people eating dogs, but it's the fact that you can't. I mean, they're not that type of animal, but I mean,
well, that's not true,
so,
Patty. I mean, like they eat them in Asia.
yeah, very very few.
Well,
Few.
there's the what's it called, the Yulin Dog Festival, I think. Right?
Yeah, that's a fringe thing. It's a fringe thing, and PETA continues to promote it because they're racist people who hate Chinese people. So they continue to promote that nonsense. It's extremely fringe, and 64% of Chinese people in the whole country believe that it's a disgrace and it should stop. So it's not something that is like a part of Asian culture.
Good response. I wasn't aware of the stats on that.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's
most of the research I've seen on it is actually done by Asian animal rights groups, not by PETA. I mean, I don't like PETA.
No, what I mean is that PETA has the loudest voice among them all. And I know of some Asian animal rights groups, and I know that they bring dogs from China, and they say that those dogs are a part of the meat trade, but they're actually not. Meat trade dogs tend to be random mixed breeds, tend to be they're not purebred dogs, is what I'm saying. I mean, they brought some like Frenchies over from China to the United States, and they lied and said that they were a part of the meat trade. And no Chinese dog meat trade seller is selling purebred Frenchies. It's just not a thing. So I take a lot of those organizations, especially if they're selling dogs over from China for adoption in the United States, I take them with a grain of salt. That's not to say that they're all like that, but a lot of them are. PETA tends to be the loudest about this, and they often promote it as something that is normal and accepted within Chinese and Asian culture, and it's not. It's really not.
Well, the point for what PETA does, again, I'm not a fan of PETA, but the point is just to demonstrate that the same way that people find it okay to eat, pigs and cows, other people in other cultures find it okay to eat dogs and cats. That's the whole point.
A lot of people in India do not believe in eating. But in fact, I mean, there's been issues. Hindus killing Muslims because Muslims will eat beef, they won't eat pork. Entirely cold. I I'm trying to figure out the correct way to say this. For the most part, the way that we see dogs and cats and guinea pigs or even rabbits is entirely based on our personal culture of how we see domesticated species. It's not if eating was that we ate dogs, then I guarantee people in the Western world would probably be eating dogs. If the history of the dog is that they're majority companions for human beings, which is what the dog became, which is what it is, that's ingrained into, I think it might be ingrained into our DNA. Then of course we don't see dogs as a type of food. We see them as, and we intrinsically see them as companions.
Yeah, no, we definitely see them that way. I think that, you know, I mean, so I think that we've because we see dogs that way, it allows us to connect more with them and understand the complexity of the animal mind. And yet we recognize that there's an equivalency in the capacities of those animals from the ones that that people in our society eat. So that's the value of that comparison. It's to see, because ultimately when I'm talking about these conditioned and unconditioned intuitions, I'm really talking about the way one way that we can condition ourselves is to condition ourselves to be sensitive to an unconditioned response. So, you see this with child soldiers who, who are trained from a very young age, to kill. Eventually, they don't feel any sort of moral compulsion to, to take, to taking life. And I think that's kind of what happens on a societal level when it comes to killing animals, particularly certain types of animals. And all of that is so when you're talking about this response that this lack of a moral concern, like to doing exploitation. I mean, this is something I brought up in the debate. It was the fact that when you kill one individual, you often feel really bad about it, but you do it again and again enough times, you become insensitive to it. You essentially develop a conditioned intuition that this unconditioned intuition that suppresses the unconditioned intuition. This thing is bad, and that's what I'm trying. And I think that by getting people to sort of reflect upon what is what is the basis for their intuitions, that they will then recognize that some of the intuitions they have are not founded upon anything anything like anything real. It's essentially a that these that are lack that the lack of the reason why these unconditioned intuitions are not being triggered is because we are not perceiving the reality of the situation. And if you can simply frame the situation in a more realistic way, then it will trigger these unconditioned stimuli, the unconditioned responses.
Right, and that just that kind of goes back to what I said. You started off with conditioned and unconditioned responses, or whatever you call it. I get confused, but you started off by saying that you kill an individual and you feel bad. Well, who's to say that that individual who killed, say, a rabbit, was already conditioned into believing that killing an animal was wrong? It's not. This isn't something that they let's say that they grew up in a vegan family, and this individual decided to kill a rabbit. Well, they're already conditioned into believing that killing that animal is wrong. That's not intrinsic. That's something that they were taught to do. So, I mean, if you were to do a thought experiment with that, you would have to avoid giving that individual who's in the thought experiment any sort of cues into any. You would have to avoid giving them any sort of basically moral guideline, which is what someone who would be raised in a vegan household would. I mean, they would be they would have a moral guideline that you should never kill an animal, right?
Sure, but why do you think they would feel bad if they killed an animal? What do you think would go through their heads?
If you're raised to believe that killing an animal is bad, you will probably feel bad the first time you kill an animal. That would be
Right.
a
So,
condition.
but what would that feeling bad? How would that manifest itself? Like, what would that feel like?
It would probably manifest itself in your parents, in memories of your parents telling you that you did something bad. This is like when someone has alcohol for the first time. We both know that there's nothing wrong with drinking alcohol, but there are people who are raised in households where drinking alcohol is forbidden. And if they drink alcohol the first time, they might feel really guilty and they'll probably feel really bad. Maybe if they drink it the second time, they won't feel as bad. They'll know they're doing something behind their parents' back, but they probably won't feel as bad. If we're comparing this to something like drinking alcohol, which is, I mean, essentially to me, as benign as that, that's something that you're taught. That's something that you're raised with. It honestly reminds me of people raised in like Mennonite and Amish homes who escaped that kind of stuff. And they experience the real world for the first time. And oftentimes they say things like, I feel really bad doing this. I feel really uncomfortable doing this. And that's simply because they were raised that way.
Yeah, that's excellent, Patty. I really like that.
Do you mind if I just cut in for just a second? I'm gonna stop the recording. In a couple of minutes because it's nearly 4 hours long already.
Jeez.
Yeah, I know. I will upload this. It's not going to be tonight. You're more than welcome to grab a copy of it, as always. That's never a problem. I want to thank you, Nick, for coming in. You've been a great participant here this evening, as per always. Your contributions are always going to be welcome in the server. One other quick announcement that I want to make is this is probably the last debate that I'm going to have on veganism. Myself, the server will continue, of course, but I won't be debating veganism quite as much from here on out. I've got some other things that I need to focus on. But yeah, thank you, Nick, for coming in. You guys can continue for as long as you want, but I will be stopping the recording after Nick. Nick, if you want to reply to any of that, then you can, and I'll keep that on the record for you.
Oh, I appreciate that, SD, because I did want to say that I really did like what Patty did at the end there, but I think that what makes it dissimilar to an alcohol or this person that comes to the society and like feels guilty over everything is that what I would suggest or what I would think that the person would feel if they feel bad for killing the animal is a sense of resonance with the experience of the animal, and that resonant state they're having with the animal, if it's real, if that animal does indeed have those characteristics that are being attributed to it, then it would be rational to feel bad about what that animal is going through, as opposed to feeling bad towards your parents who told you that it was wrong to drink alcohol or told you it's wrong to kill an animal. If you only feel bad for that reason, then I would argue that would be more kind of like a psychopathic response. But I think it's a very interesting comparison for sure.
Well, wouldn't you feel if someone drank alcohol and you know, you mentioned psychopath, but the difference between things like psychopathy and sociopathy is that those individuals is that people who are not that way try to empathize. The reason why someone would feel bad about drinking alcohol because their parents told them not to is because they're probably thinking, what would my parents think? And to me, that's no different from what did that animal feel when I killed it, when I shot it, or when I did whatever. Well, I mean, how's that any different from if you drink alcohol and you think, oh man, what would my parents think? Would they be embarrassed? Would they be or would they be hurt, emotionally hurt? I mean, you mentioned doing things that are disrespectful to people is immoral. Well, I mean, if you hurt your parents' feelings because you disobeyed them, that's immoral.
Yeah, and that's interesting, Patty. I mean, I think that's also where religious obligation kind of comes from too, is feeling like you're violating something that God, who loves you, gave you all this, give you the universe, and then you spit in God's face and you feel bad towards God, just like you might
Yeah.
feel bad for your parents or bad to the animal. Yeah, I think that actually is an empathetic response. But what I'm saying is that when it comes to killing the animal, after being raised as a vegan family, you might feel bad to your parents, but if you're not also feeling bad to the animal, if you're only feeling bad to the parents, like as in the alcohol example, then that's kind of psychopathic because you're ignoring the main victim there, which is not your parents, it's the animal.
Yeah, I think so. I think the issue here is that I'm kind of disconnected with the idea, because I certainly see the feelings of the animal as certainly less than the ability to feed my family. So that's probably where I'm disconnected. I get what you mean. Don't get me wrong. I absolutely get what you mean. But I don't identify with the idea, I guess.
Okay, so SD, I
Okay.
guess you're cutting off. I mean, I really hope you don't
all I'm doing
retire.
is stopping the recording. You guys
Or
can
don't retire,
continue.
SD.
No,
I
I'll
love
still
you.
be here. But, I've got to stop the recording, otherwise it's going to blow my
No, I mean,
laptop
I
up
don't
or
want you to
something.
retire from vegan debate. I really appreciate your involvement. But anyway,
I appreciate yours as well. It's been great having you here. It's always good having you here. You're a great interlocutor, and I do enjoy talking to you. And I want to thank Beyond as well. I mean, he's down in a different channel in the server talking to Lizzie or shouting at Lizzie, whatever is going on down there. I don't know. But no, I do want to say thank you sincerely for coming back again, because this is at least the second time that we've had you agree to come over here for a discussion or a debate or an AMA or something like that. So yeah, I do want to say thank you very much to you, Nick, and to Beyond. He can't hear me, but he'll hear it on the recording.
Oh, and thanks, Patty, for kind of taking over the end here.
No problem. I've been in a very
Hey,
interesting.
Patty, I